Will elect representatives to their national parliaments, while in England, 5,000 seats on 136 local councils up for grabs. The polls closing at 10 o'clock tonight. Well, do tune in for an election coverage tonight and tomorrow. From midnight tonight, Jonathan Samuels here to take you through the early results as they come in. 6:05 on a Thursday morning to the conflict in the Middle East, and Israel has attacked Beirut for the first time since it agreed to a ceasefire in the war with Hezbollah. The airstrike hit the Lebanese capital's southern suburbs known as Daria. Israel's Prime Minister said he had personally approved the strike, targeting a commander of Hezbollah's elite Radwan force. The attack adds further pressure to the ceasefire agreed last month, which has failed to stop the conflict. Meanwhile, peace talks between the US and Iran appear to be gaining momentum, even as an American jet fired on an Iranian ship in the Gulf of Oman. Iran's confirmed that it's assessing proposals from Washington. Donald Trump said that an agreement will be made and the war will be over quickly. The US president under pressure to reach a deal with the Iranians before he meets with the Chinese President Xi Jinping next week.
We're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon. We're not going to let that happen, and we won't let that happen. And so we're dealing with people that want to make a deal very much, and we'll see whether or not they can make a deal that's satisfactory to us. We have it very much under control. The blockade is unbelievable. The Navy's been incredible. The job they did, it's like a wall of steel. Nobody goes through. In particular, the Iranians, they're not getting anything through one way or the other, so they're out of business. And we'll see whether or not they are agreeing. And if they don't agree, they'll end up agreeing shortly thereafter. So that's the way it is.
Our US correspondent David Blevins has more.
What a head-spinning couple of days it's been. We went from Pete Hegseth, the man who calls himself Secretary of War, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, telling us that the war was over and they'd shifted their focus to Project Freedom, reopening the Strait of Hormuz, to President Trump telling us he had paused his Project Freedom because they were making such progress in negotiations. In a post online, he said if Iran kept its word, then the strait would be open to all in capital letters, and if it didn't, the bombing would resume with even greater intensity than before. That sounds like a president who's hedging his bets. And this talk of a one-page document being drawn up sounds like a can being kicked down the road. It's a framework, we're told, for future negotiations on Iran's nuclear capability. Could it be that 9 weeks of war has had such an impact on Iran's economy, America's economy, the global economy, affecting so much of the world's oil supply, that one or both sides is capitulating? Donald Trump says Iran badly wants a deal, and they will get there. But will they get there in time for him to take a detour to Islamabad on his way to China next week so he can sign a piece of paper?
Details there from David Blevins. Well, as the flow of oil and gas through the Strait of Hormuz remains largely restricted, the world's turning west to help fill the energy gap. A record number of oil tankers are making their way to the US coast, and our economics and data editor Ed Conway has visited the highest producing oil field in the US and sent this report.
They call this place the energy capital of the world. It is a major hub for oil, gas and petrochemicals. 10 large oil refineries, more than double the total in all of Britain, a port and a deep water shipping channel that makes this one of the key gateways for all that American oil. David Brazil has spent more than 20 years monitoring the numbers on America's energy industry. He's giving me a tour of the area. But one question looms large. How much more oil can America supply to the rest of the world?
Is this whole export operation kind of running as hot as it could?
No, it is not.
Oh, really?
No.
There's more that could be pumped.
We could still pump and export more.
Exports have jumped to a record high of 6 million barrels a day in April, partly due to emergency stockpile releases. But there is still room for more.
We estimate that on the Gulf Coast we have roughly 7 million barrels a day of export capacity.
So people in Europe wondering to themselves, okay, we've got this big shortage of oil and petroleum products. Where is it going to come from? This place could be a big part of that answer.
This place could be a very big part for Europe specifically, actually.
That explains why, out on the high seas, we are witnessing a striking phenomenon: an armada of empty crude oil tankers turning west in record numbers. But extracting enough oil to help fill those tankers isn't as simple as you might think. One challenge is that whenever you get oil out of the ground, you also get gas. And strange as this will sound, in this case, that's actually a problem.
They're currently producing, somewhere in the neighborhood of 22.5 BCF a day of dry natural gas, which is more than there is capacity to get out of the Permian.
A lot of people will be killing themselves for, to have that much natural gas.
That's exactly right. And they are paying people to take it away. Last week, the price got to...
They're paying people to take it from them.
Negative $9 per MMBTU.
That is crazy.
It was wild.
Wow.
And so it's actually a cap on how much you want to produce crude, because you can't do anything with the gas that's going to come out whether you like it or not.
So that's limiting their ability or willingness to pump the crude out of the ground.
Precisely.
Because there's too much gas and they don't have anywhere for that gas to go.
Yep.
So it just gets wasted. For me, in the UK, that's so frustrating. Because that presumably means we're not getting as much oil and gas as we could from America, because the pipeline's not quite there yet.
Not quite there yet.
11 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to speed on some of the day's other stories. A purported suicide note left by Jeffrey Epstein's been released for the first time. The note, which has not been authenticated by US law enforcement, was made public by a federal judge. The note says, "They investigated me for months, found nothing. It is a treat to be able to choose one's time to say goodbye." The letter apparently left during an incident in which the convicted paedophile was injured but survived. His death in prison in August 2019 was, though, ruled as suicide. Meghan Markle has shared a previously unseen photo of Prince Archie to celebrate his 7th birthday. The Duchess of Sussex posted the picture to Instagram of Archie as a baby sleeping on Harry's chest. The post also included a more recent image of him alongside his younger sister, Princess Lilibet, walking along a beach. Still to come here on the programme, a family in Gaza search for answers after a photo surfaces of 2 missing family members in the back of a military vehicle.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
On who has a seat at the table. Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
To the results
the analysis.
and what comes next. Join us for Vote 26. Get the full story fast on Sky News.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
On who has a seat at the table. Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
To the results
the analysis.
and what comes next. Join us for Vote 26. Get the full story fast on Sky News.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Drangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
You're watching Sky News. Gareth Barlow with you. Let's turn our attention to a months-long Sky News investigation that's pieced together the events leading to the detention of a mother and daughter in Gaza and the mysteries surrounding their disappearance. The family, desperately searching for answers, discovered a harrowing photo of the two women blindfolded in the back of a military vehicle. They've not been seen or heard from since. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford has this exclusive report.
This is a story of one family from Gaza, their terror and terrible loss and their fight for answers. It's a mystery about much-loved relatives who've disappeared and asks, is this Israeli policy? And how many others have vanished in Gaza? It's also the story of a single photograph. On the left of the picture is Huda Al-Akkad. Next to her is her 78-year-old mother, Aisha. They're in the back of an Israeli military vehicle. There's no explanation from the Israeli military about why they're photographed like this, why they were detained, and very little detail about what happened to them afterwards. Their surviving family members are clinging to the hope that somehow their relatives are alive. They only discovered the picture recently, some 2 years after it was taken, and they urgently want answers.
By God, I demand justice. Our whole family does. We hope they're alive and we can get them out. We want a medical body, anybody, the Red Cross, anyone to stand with us, go through all the procedures and find out which prison they're in.
We want justice and someone held accountable. We want to know what happened to them. Where are they? Have they been killed by the Israelis? Are they in Israeli prison somewhere? We want to know.
We've been looking into the photograph with a team of investigative lawyers from around the world. We've pieced together the events leading up to the disappearance of the women. We've interviewed witnesses and surviving family and examined satellite images. We've compiled open-source intelligence and scrutinized the soldiers' social media posts. The Glan lawyers have been involved in several legal cases against Israel in recent years. Together, we're left with multiple worrying question marks about the women who disappeared.
This photograph, at the very least, illustrates that these two women were taken captive by the Israeli military in very degrading conditions.
As a human rights lawyer, it's one of the most worrying things that can happen when a state takes in people and makes them disappear.
When this is done systematically, it may amount to a crime against humanity.
We need to take you back to December 2023. A temporary truce between Israel and Hamas had broken down, and the Israeli military was launching what became known as fire belts in Gaza, a line of rapid aerial bombardments. Israeli troops then moved into the Khan Yunis area. The Al-Akkad family and thousands of others were ordered by the Israeli military to leave their homes. In the face of these military maneuvers, most of the Al-Akkad family fled, but their elderly parents, Mohammed and Aisha, refused to go, and 3 of their grown-up children stayed with them. They were sons Iyad and Zakaria and their daughter Huda. In this satellite image before the onslaught, we've highlighted the series of homes where the extended Al-Akkad family lived on 5th Street in the Al-Katiba neighborhood. As the fighting became more intense, the relatives who'd already fled were begging their parents to leave too. They recorded a call thinking it would be their last. Their parents and siblings were now trapped with Israeli tanks on the street. 2 different audio experts have told us the background sounds are consistent with drones, gunfire and explosions. Bakir rings his trapped brother Zakaria with his wife Tarir, who's frantic with worry.
ناموا بدار اياد روحوا قول لهم ناموا بدار اياد دقوش في هذا مش كويس خطر دقدوق تامن دقدوق ومحمد شهروا كلهم عيب ايش قلت لك انا عارف الحزام النار بده يهجد كل العالم طب انت بتسمع صوت الدبابه غاد بتحرط على الارض؟ هذا عنده خش في الحكوره يا معلم. خش ولا يسوي.
Satellite images from 6th of December show Israeli troops closing in. 80 vehicles are visible within a few kilometres of the house. Several are moving along a road that leads directly to the family's neighbourhood. The next day, the troops are much closer. 2 military bases can now be seen and have been established less than 400 metres from the house. By December 8th, there's heavy fighting and explosions around the nearby Al-Katiba Mosque. The Israeli military says via telegram channels they've been attacked by Hamas fighters. 2 soldiers were killed in the fighting. The mosque was destroyed. The Israeli military announces the dead soldiers are from the Golani Brigade's Battalion 12 and issues videos of them operating. The same day, the trapped siblings say their father's been shot by Israeli snipers in his backyard and urgently needs help.
My brother called me and said, our father's wounded and we need an ambulance or the Red Cross. Get help from someone. I called the Red Cross and they said they couldn't go to the 5th Street. I called the ambulance and they also said it's a combat zone and they couldn't get in.
The Israeli troops are still very active in the area. The trapped siblings frantically call and text that Israeli gunfire and armed drones are stopping them reaching their wounded father in the backyard. They watch from the house as he bleeds out and dies. His body's never been recovered. The siblings and their mother flee to a neighbour's house on the same street. The surviving family members lose contact with their trapped relatives around this time. Video taken from inside one of the Al-Akkad homes shows it was comprehensively trashed by the Israeli military action. Room after room is a pile of destruction. From one balcony, there's a glimpse of the rear. That is where their parents' home used to be and where Mohammed, their father, was shot whilst praying in the backyard. This is what the family returned to when the troops withdrew 4 months later. They found nothing but destruction and body parts.
When I went to the body, I didn't know who it was because half of it was missing. The body remained there for about 2 months.
Our investigations could not determine exactly how or why the 2 women ended up with the Israeli soldiers. Only the soldiers can answer that. But at least one witness said they saw the elderly Aisha clinging to her son Zachariah as troops dragged her away. The Sky News data and forensics team and the Glan investigators separately confirmed the identities of the 3 soldiers pictured in the Israeli military vehicle. The soldier far left is Lieutenant Ido Meir, commander of Leopard Platoon in the Golani Brigade's 12th Battalion. Next to him is Sergeant Dolif Mor Yusuf and then Amit Elyakov. Sergeant Mor Yusuf posted the photo on social media before hastily deleting it. None of them replied to our requests for comment. The IDF issued several videos at this time, including showing the 12th Battalion in the area the same day Mohammed was killed and around the time the 2 women and Zachariah disappeared. Soldiers from Leopard Platoon also posted pictures of themselves there. In one, again geolocated, Sergeant Mor Yusuf is seen in what was once the Al-Akkad's backyard. Behind him is the Al-Akkad home where the interior video was taken. Sergeant Mor Yusuf is seen posing in another house with bulldozed land behind him and military vehicles. This one, again posted by Sergeant Mor Yusuf, shows the Leopard Platoon with a sniper platoon. One of their members also posted on social media. Sniper Sasha Abramovich is geolocated to the same spot near the Al-Akkad homes, corroborating their claims of snipers operating where their father was killed. 5th Street, where the family used to live, is now unrecognisable. The whole area has been pulverised. All the Al-Akkad family homes have been destroyed, and with them the chance of any forensic assessment of exactly what happened and who might be buried was also destroyed. The survivors are now all living in tents and until recently believed all the relatives who'd stayed behind had been killed. Then they discovered Samar's husband Iyad was actually alive and in an Israeli prison. Her lawyer managed to visit him.
His condition is okay. He's thinner than before. He weighs about 60 kilograms. She told me he's fine, but he's got spots on his body.
So whose body parts were in the destruction of the family homes, and what happened to the 2 women after they were pictured with the Israeli soldiers? There's no record of the women in any Israeli prison and no record of their deaths.
We've sent all these letters and emails to a range of different commanders and Israeli authorities. We've got just one reply from an official Israeli military WhatsApp account, and an unnamed official replied to us saying that the incident had been referred for review. That was in February. They admitted that the women had been what they called temporarily detained along with others, but they say the women were released soon after in an area further from the troops' operational activity. But the Glan lawyers say that's not good enough.
It's not lawful for the Israeli military to go around detaining people arbitrarily, not keeping any records of why, not keeping any records of for how long, and not keeping any records of when they were released, let alone not releasing them in circumstances where they're safe.
Thousands of people have gone missing in Gaza since October 2023. A report this March by ISAP and the Palestine Reporting Lab found between 14,000 to 15,000 people remain unaccounted for. But it can't differentiate between those buried under rubble and those it describes as forcibly disappeared. Gaza's health ministry says that although thousands are still under the rubble, families believe this is not the case for around 3,000 relatives. The ICRC says it has even more reports of missing people still unresolved, between 5,000 and 6,000, with fears that many are being held incommunicado in Israeli detention centres. In many instances, these people were last seen in the custody of Israeli troops. The Israeli human rights group Hamaked says it has individually documented 800 such cases. A range of other organisations too have logged high numbers of people who vanished in Gaza after being last seen with Israeli troops, and many fear the high numbers point to a systemic policy.
We know of these hundreds of cases of people that have just disappeared after being held by the Israeli forces inside the Gaza Strip. These numbers and this policy that's been ongoing since the start of the war is clearly not an accident or some upheaval in the first days of the war. It's something systematic, and yeah, that's how we can say it's a policy.
Multiple organisations say appeals for information about missing people go unanswered by the Israeli military and the government bodies.
It's also very common, unfortunately, for people to be forcibly disappeared in the context of the ongoing war in Gaza. There's a significant level of complicity from different levels of the Israeli state and institutions with this practice. It's very difficult to obtain information, and attempts to do this through the legal system have so far mostly failed.
The suffering for the Al-Akkad family is in no way lessening. Like so many thousands of others, they're crying out for answers about what happened to their relatives who just vanished in Gaza. Alex Crawford, Sky News.
Well, in response to our investigation, a spokesperson for the IDF said the individuals mentioned are not being held by the IDF, and there is no indication that they were held in IDF detention facilities. The incident has been referred for review. It went on during operational activity by IDF troops. Several individuals were temporarily detained in the field. The women were released in the Gaza Strip shortly thereafter. Watching Sky News, Gareth Parley with you. Plenty more stories on the Sky News website and the Sky News app. Also, a bit of time now for the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Next couple of days, cool, cloudy, mainly dry. A risk of showers, though, some of them heavy. England and Wales, mostly dry, sunny spells in the morning, although the southeast and the west, the odd light shower there. Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, meanwhile, showers developing widely. Some more general showery rain will move into the increasingly windy northwest by lunchtime. Cool again after a locally frosty start. It'll be a touch warmer than yesterday. The afternoon will bring little change, but showery rain will take over more of the northwest, while western England and Wales seeing showers developing more widely.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Still to come, Harry Kane was on target for Bayern Munich against Paris Saint-Germain, but it was enough to clinch a Champions League spot in the final against Arsenal? The details to come after the break.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
On who has a seat at the table. Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next. Join us for Vote 26. Get the full story fast on Sky News.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here. In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
You're watching Sky News, Gareth Barlow with you. Let's bring you more on our top story. A British Hantavirus patient told Sky News he's isolating in hospital after being evacuated from the cruise ship at the centre of the outbreak. Martin Anstey, an expedition guide on board the MV Hondius, was speaking from his hospital bed in the Netherlands. Says he's doing OK, but will have a clearer picture after tests are carried out. 3 people have died from the outbreak. Another passenger, Rui Senet, left the cruise ship before the second death, but told Sky News there was little change to practice on board after the first death was confirmed.
Then captain said one of the passengers sadly passed away, and it was due to natural causes. We're not in infection. There's no contagious disease, something like that. So this was a relaxing explanation, but this was not the case, because the first death was because of the Hantavirus. And after this announcement, we were not ready, or we were not isolated for what was to come. We were together during breakfast, lunch, and dinner timings in the dining room all together. There was open buffet, and we had lecture sessions, group activities. Still, even after the day that we had someone passed away, until my last day, 24th of April, we didn't take any cautions. We were not informed about the situation, and the ship management, I think, didn't know anything about the virus.
Let's turn attention to the conflict in Iran. Donald Trump has predicted that the war will be over quickly, but Tehran said it was still considering a peace proposal from Washington. The US president under pressure to reach a deal with the Iranians before he meets the Chinese President Xi Jinping next week. Well, for more on the upcoming visit, check out Cheat Sheet with Sophie Wolf.
If Saudi, pulled access to US air bases, pretty significant. I think because we've all been focused on the King's visit to the US, we've all been slightly missing the most important, perhaps diplomatic visit in a decade, which is next Thursday and Friday. It's President Trump going to Beijing to see President Xi. And early this week, the Iranian foreign minister went to China. And if we're looking at what might be suddenly pressuring both sides, but the US as well, to at least play nice temporarily, hopefully permanently, it's probably that trip.
Well, if you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can listen to today's Cheat Sheet podcast in full or find it on the Sky News app. Time for the sport.
James, can you do a big clap in front of your face? Perfect. OK, mate, in your own time.
One word to describe James Milner.
Legend. Unique.
Consistent. Dedicated.
Intense.
Brilliant.
He just loves to win.
I think he's everything you'd want to be in a footballer.
The Premier League loves James Milner.
Hi James, congratulations on breaking the all-time Premier League appearance record and how hard it is to keep going. You felt phenomenal, so well done.
To be appreciated by your teammates and appreciate what you give, that's pretty special.
England's future looks healthy, and here at Leeds United's training ground, they reckon they're once again grooming tomorrow's World Cup stars.
The board now.
Still to come here on Sky News, we'll discuss the stories making the headlines in today's papers with our panellist, editor-in-chief of the news movement, Becca Hudson.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table. Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next. Join us for Vote 26. Get the full story fast on Sky News.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table. Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next. Join us for Vote 26. Get the full story fast on Sky News.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them. Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing.
I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island. The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Next couple of days, cool, cloudy, mainly dry, a risk of showers, some of them heavy. England and Wales, mostly dry with sunny spells this morning. The southeast and the west just catching the odd light shower. Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, seeing showers developing widely. Some more general showery rain moving into the increasingly windy northwest by lunchtime. Cool again after a locally frosty start. A touch warmer than yesterday, top temperature 16 degrees. The afternoon, little change, some showery rain taking over the northwest.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Time to take a look at the headlines in the papers, in the newsview. Please say we're joined by Beck Hudson, Editor-in-Chief of the News Movement. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. In a different location as well.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it?
It's like the old times. Yeah, I almost took a cab in the wrong direction. I did actually the other day. I got to have a little snooze on the way to work.
Yeah.
Woke up, took a cab to completely the wrong office. It was a lovely start to my morning.
Oh, gosh.
Was to discover I was in Westminster, not in Osterley.
A little stressful, I'd say.
A little stressful,
Jolted
yeah.
you away.
Yeah, and a little stressful for the production crew. Like, where are you? I'm like 7 miles away. And you would never trust the presenters to do anything correct. But we can trust the presenters to guide us through the papers and trust you to tell us what's in them. We're going to start with The Guardian. And this headline, agreed to peace deal or fresh face wave of bombing, Trump says Iran. And the kind of weird situation yesterday where we were just on the tail end of hearing from people like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth saying Operation Freedom is going to ensure that all of these commercial vessels and tankers can transit through the Strait of Hormuz. Like, this is the next stage. And then all of a sudden a Truth Social post going, well, actually, hang on a second. Putting a pause on that because we think there's going to be some agreement maybe with Iran, and everyone going, oh, pinch of salt, because apparently at least 40 times during this war, the president said that there's good conversations going on. And then Axios come out with a report citing a source saying, looks like there's a one-pager. So you're like, well, let's get a little bit more of a pinch of salt. And then Reuters citing a source close to the Pakistanis going, it looks like there's a bit more, a bit more. And all of a sudden, you're like, hang on a second. It looks as though, and the market's responding as well, it looks as though there is a direction of travel that might be finding a way out of all of this. But the president keeping that caveat of, well, if we don't find a way out, we're going to go in hard again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in terms of sort of erratic behaviour, I mean, I think this is kind of the most perfect demonstration of it, isn't it? You know, the weekend, it was very bloodthirsty talk. We then had the sort of huge humanitarian effort of Project Freedom, and now back to, as you say, kind of, with this potential of there being some sort of peace deal or agreement on the table, back to sort of, hardcore threats posted on Truth Social, in the middle of the night. I mean, it's kind of fascinating approach to diplomacy, if we can call it that. And lots of speculation that, Trump is going to be in China next week, and we know that Beijing are sort of desperate for this war. They want a kind of a comprehensive end to this conflict. And so is he, he wants to turn up in China, with a success story, doesn't he? This is going to be a kind of really interesting exercise in sort of, two of our world's, greatest polar powers meeting. And so is there a sort of, Trump thinking he needs to turn up with a sort of good news story and a win under his belt when it comes to this conflict? But, as you say, we've had this 40 times in this war. And so how many more posts on Truth Social are there to come? And, and how much can we trust that, Trump will go into these peace talks and Iran, with an outcome, to guarantee a peaceful outcome?
So Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister in Beijing, meeting there, the Chinese buy something like 90% of Iran's oil, and China, with a huge economy, reliant on that to a degree. So you can see where all the economic push points are, and you can be damn sure that the markets and big business are desperate for the straits to reopen. And you kind of wonder, like you say, if the 14th of May, I think, is the trip, whether that is kind of the point that all sides are working towards.
Yeah, exactly. And wouldn't that be such a huge relief? Because obviously there's the kind of, there is the reliance in terms of oil, but we also know that there's this huge issue around sort of availability of fertiliser and what that's going to mean for food prices. People are worried about their holidays. There's this huge kind of consumer and retail angle to this, as well as what we're seeing geopolitically. So I think it's going to be a fascinating week, kind of, on the world stage, and watching that interface between Trump, Iran and China playing out. It's going to be quite fascinating to watch.
I do want to just take it back, though, to its roots, because we'll, in due course, hopefully go and fill up the car with diesel. It's not $1.90 a litre. But this all really began, certainly this latest situation with Iran, back in early January, when thousands, if not tens of thousands of people were killed, slaughtered by their own government because they were coming out to protest against the cost of living and the situation of the country. And the cost of living and the situation of the country exacerbated, understandably, by the sanctions that were employed by the United States following the ripping up of the nuclear deal in 2018. But the response to protest was brutal. And all of this began back then, and Donald Trump and the West said, look, help is on its way, we're going to support you, we're going to try and bring about a different future for you. I do not foresee, if the Strait of Hormuz opens, a different future for the 90 million people who live in Iran. They still have, at the moment, that brutal, if not more repressive regime, if not more militarised regime, if not more antagonised and aggressive hardliners who are now in power. We might go, oh, my God, thank goodness we can go and do things a bit more easily. We can go on holiday and not have to worry about jet fuel. Thank goodness we can fill up the car a bit more cheaply than we could have done through March and April.
Yeah. But
what about Iranians?
Completely right. And I think, if you looked at kind of all of the Truth Social posts and all of sort of Trump's, on-the-record statements, I don't think the people of Iran get a huge amount, of airtime or attention from him. And I think you're right about this kind of further emboldened, more aggressive regime, that will emerge post this conflict. And what that means for those people there, I think, is deeply worrying. I completely agree.
Let's move on to page 13 of The Telegraph. The headlines today are remarkable. How emboldened Pope has found his voice and won a war of words with Trump.
Yeah, it's kind of quite a remarkable sort of, tit for tat, sort of back and forth, isn't it? You've got Donald Trump, attacking, God's representative on earth, if you happen to sort of, if you're a member of the Catholic faith. And we've seen, Donald Trump accusing Leo XIV of being everything from being soft on crime. He said that he wanted Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And actually, sort of, the Pope sort of occupying this almost, kind of, rather than sort of just sort of letting it be said, has sort of fought back against what Trump has said. And, says that, he's doing the mission of the gospel, criticising what, Trump's actions in Iran, him sort of perpetuating untruths. So it's really interesting. And there was obviously this picture that Trump put out on his Truth Social, which sort of depicted him as Jesus. And there's some fascinating polling in this Telegraph article about how badly this plays with the, with the American base and the American public. Deeply religious, if you happen to be religious in America, having a hugely negative view of him, sort of, depicting himself as Jesus. 87% of people polled saying that they don't agree, they don't particularly like their president sort of picking a fight with the Pope. And I think it's sort of fascinating, isn't it, that he seems to have no respect for anyone. But I think amazing that the Pope, responds, and we've got Marco Rubio in the Vatican today sort of looking to repair that relationship, which feels a challenge.
Yeah, very much so. And I think, the president kind of feels as though he can maybe pull the levers of power against most people. You can deploy sanctions against countries. You can swoop into Venezuela and pluck out a world leader from their bed. You can target the leader of the Federal Reserve and call them all sorts of names and hopefully kind of force about change. The one person that, maybe from Donald Trump's perspective, is relatively untouchable is the Pope.
Yes.
But he's also an American, so he feels as though he probably should be... And there's that kind of conflict within the way that the president typically operates. Well, normally I can go for these people, but I can't with this one. But I want...
Yeah, and then not being able to compute that, and so just kind of keeping going. I think it's amazing, and, it really hurts him domestically, so I think probably calm down.
Well, you talk about hurt domestically, that's just on the final bit. Mr Trump won the white Catholic vote by more than 20 points in the 2024 presidential election. His approval rating, that group, 49%, compared to 63% a year ago. Approval rating stands at 38%, with all Catholics a 10-point drop since then. So, it's definitely taking its toll. To a story that developed quite widely yesterday, we followed the situation on the MV Hondius, that cruise ship that's been affected by the Hantavirus outbreak. This is on page 5 of the Daily Mail. And there's this image of the cruise ship that's now on its way from Cape Verde, heading towards the Canary Islands, but there's an image of it as it was stationed off the coast of Cape Verde, being visited by this kind of small little tender, I guess, with these kind of PPE-clad health workers that have been supported by the World Health Organization, taking off these 3 individuals who are then being transported elsewhere. But, of course, everyone wants to know, well, where did this all begin? And it appears, the working hypothesis at the moment, that the Dutch pair who visited a landfill site to take photos of birds in Ushuaia, where the cruise originated, get on board. Hantavirus takes 1 to 8 weeks to incubate, 2 to 4 on average. And, of course, unfortunately, whilst the ship has no reports of rats, no reports of any vermin on board, the virus is taken on nonetheless. And then, of course, just close proximity. It's that kind of... It's all of the kind of fear factors of COVID all over again, but in a very different sense.
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely right. And, you know, so interesting to find out sort of where this has come from, because it's sort of, you know, neither of us had ever heard of Hantavirus before, and now it's something that kind of, you know, feels like it's very much part of the lexicon. And interesting that you mentioned coronavirus, because it sort of feels like, you know, the World Health Organization, Yvette Cooper, sort of people are very keen to stop making those comparisons, aren't they? They're saying this is not the next epidemic, this is not the next pandemic. You know, if early medical intervention can manage and manage these symptoms and manage this virus, but it does. You're right. It looks
visual.
It feels complete. You know, the PPE, like you say, the people being quarantined, people being trapped on ships. It does feel hugely reminiscent of that time, and I think there's going to be a real challenge in terms of kind of public health messaging to sort of keep people calm, but also vigilant about, you know, whether they would have come into contact with these people and identifying those symptoms early enough so that medical intervention can be successful.
Yes, I said the name Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the head of the WHO yesterday. I haven't said that name for years. But that is the crucial point to kind of make clear. The World Health Organization saying the risk to humans is very low indeed. Human-to-human transfer, typically with hantavirus, is actually quite rare in itself. It's a virus that really doesn't really affect North America or the West or Europe. There are about 150,000 cases globally a year, but it's typically not an issue for most parts of the world. Let's move on to an interesting story, blue dot fever.
This is interesting, actually. This is a little bit of
The Times, page
talking
17.
about COVID again. So this new phenomenon called blue dot fever, which is where you know, you go to buy a ticket for a tour or a concert, and none of the tickets had been sold, and so you've now got artists like the Pussycat Dolls, which I find devastating because I was so delighted that they'd reformed. Disappointed I wasn't asked to join them. Meghan Trainor, still time. Call me.
I mean, they've got a gap in their touring schedule now.
They've got a lot of gaps. So lots of these sort of big artists who are going on tour, and, you know, putting out these performances, just not selling enough tickets, and it's now been called sort of blue dot fever, which is, you know, when you go on Ticketmaster and you can see all the available seats. And there was this initial post-COVID sort of live music boom, and everyone was prepared to pay hundreds of pounds to go and see Taylor Swift or whoever it might be. But, you know, looking at kind of economic uncertainty now, you know, and people just sort of not feeling like they've got that disposable income to go and spend on something like live music, you're now seeing, you know, it really impacting, you know, artists of all kind of calibre and levels of fame, which I just think is a huge shame, because I think kind of going to a concert is one of life's small, great pleasures.
And that was the thing, wasn't it? The challenge at Harry Styles' door, the cost of tickets. And then actually interesting that he didn't really do that many gigs, and maybe indicative of the fact that actually it's harder than it used to be to fill stadia. But then at the same time, I went and saw a friend of mine who runs a very successful podcast, fills Wembley Stadium. Wembley Arena, not stadium.
OK.
Still, Wembley Arena fills Wembley Arena.
Maybe the Pussycat Dolls should start a podcast then and see if that works.
Pussycat Dolls, the podcast. I mean, the alliteration works quite nicely.
Really well, exactly.
So you're joining the Pussycat Dolls. Yeah. I think I have to legally join Take That.
Yes.
Considering my name.
You do. Oh, I think we just saved the live music industry.
Matt de Groot, the assistant editor, enjoyed that one. It's rare that I get a laugh from him. Let's talk about Ryanair calling for alcohol bans at airport before early flights. And this is Michael O'Leary saying, and I think the figure was, they are turning around a plane a day due to unruly behaviour. Yeah. It used to be a plane a week, and now it's a plane a day. And he's like, look, you don't need to come on a plane drunk. You don't need to go to, let's be honest, a very well-known pub chain at 5 a.m. in the hotel bar and go and get plastered. And I think he made the interesting point. it's the delays often that are the challenge, because people are like, well, I'm bored.
What am I going to do?
I'm just going to drink. And Brits like a drink before they go on holiday. It's interesting, Richard Holdren from the Conservatives came out yesterday and was like, nah, it's a bit of a tradition. You've got to keep it. You can't, like, let's not kind of rule people's lives too closely. But at the same time, there are 180 people in the sky at 30,000 feet, and they have every right to have a safe, enjoyable, relaxing journey. And if there are one or two, and there's many words going through my head at the moment, which I'm not going to use, because Ofcom will be after me. But if there's one or two of those people ruining it for everybody else, then you can understand my clearly at this point.
I completely agree, and I think kind of, you know, one drink at the airport, if you have to, makes my sort of stomach churn, maybe. But what I thought was interesting about this is that he doesn't want to restrict alcohol sales on his flights. He wants them to restrict it at the airport. So he's saying kind of, yeah, you know, well-known pub chains, you know, should have a kind of limit on how much people should be able to drink before they board. But he isn't as keen to implement a limit on how much people can drink while on board, which I thought was a kind of bit of an interesting distinction. But, you know, you're completely right. You know, if you're on a family holiday or kind of, you know, a quiet getaway and you're kind of, you know, surrounded by, you know, really drunk people that are potentially jeopardising your ability to go on holiday, I think my sympathy and empathy levels are pretty low. And I think maybe it's a British tradition, but maybe it's not one that we need to be sort of that proud of.
The number of times you see kind of stuff served on your algorithm on social media feeds of Brits abroad behaving in pretty despicable ways. And he also talked about the fact, unfortunately, you know, the number of people that are also on drugs, you know, before they fly, which is illegal. You know, and again, you also think there are cabin crew who do a remarkable job having to then try and police this. And you know, the fines are significant. Fine of £5,000, you can be in prison for 2 years. You know, they had to file legal proceedings against one passenger who caused an issue. They filed legal proceedings of €15,000 against that passenger. So it's a big challenge. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us. Stick with us for all the day's headlines. Sophie and Wilf, just in that studio over there. It's all coming up next here on Sky News.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
morning. It is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Bridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well.
A British expedition guide who was on the cruise ship hit with Hantavirus speaks to Sky News and reveals he's isolating in hospital after falling out.
President Trump says the war in Iran will be over quickly as he looks to pressure Tehran into agreeing a deal.
Beirut is hit by Israel for the first time since the ceasefire.
Also today, former England rugby captain Lewis Moody talks about his fight against motor neuron disease and how the diagnosis has affected him.
We all think we'll reach a certain place or things we'll see and be involved in. So, you know, the things that you will miss.
Very good morning to you. A British Hantavirus patient has told Sky News he's isolating in hospital after being evacuated from the cruise ship at the centre of the outbreak.
His name is Martin Anstey. He's an expedition guide who was on board the MV Hondius, and he spoke to us from his hospital bed in the Netherlands. We also know that 2 other British people are now self-isolating in the UK for up to 8 weeks. They're isolating, but it should be said they're not currently showing any symptoms.
Emma's here to tell us a little bit more about what we know with this British development.
So he's 56 years old, Martin Anstey. Now, it was thought that he was the ship's doctor. Actually, he's an expedition guide, a retired police officer. And when one of our colleagues spoke to him last night, he said he was doing OK. Lots of tests are being done. Doctors expect to have a clearer picture later this week. He was one of 3 that were evacuated from the MV Hondius, flown away from Cape Verde, where the ship was docked. It's now on its way to the Canary Islands. Now, there were also on board, evacuated, a Dutch colleague of his, 41 years old, and a German passenger, 69 years old. We know one of them didn't get to the Netherlands. There was a delay, but apparently that passenger is stable. We know that Martin Anstey's wife, Nicola, has spoken to The Telegraph, who described it as being a very traumatic few days. You can only imagine, can't you? It's been up and down, started with mild symptoms, became more serious and is now said to be stable and obviously relieved to be off the ship. Now, last night, Yalda Hakim spoke to Rui Genet, who had been on board, and explained what happened after they were told that someone had died.
Then captain said one of the passengers sadly passed away, and it was due to natural causes. We're not we're not in infection. There's no contagious disease, something like that. So this was a relaxing explanation, but this was not the case, because the first death was because of the Hantavirus. And after this announcement, we were not ready, or we were not isolated for what was to come. We were together during breakfast, lunch, and dinner timings in the dining room all together. There was open buffet, and we had lecture sessions, group activities. Still, even after the day that we had someone passed away, until my last day, 24th of April, we didn't take any cautions. We were not informed about the situation, and the ship management, I think, didn't know anything about the virus.
Listening to that, it's pretty clear that there's going to be questions about the transmission of this, how it was spread. But also there's a theory that's been put forward about how it started, right?
Yeah, so this has come from officials in Argentina speaking anonymously. And they think that a couple who were on the cruise had gone bird watching at a landfill site in Argentina, in Ushuaia, which is the southernmost city. And that we know that this Hantavirus, this is the Andes strain, is passed via contaminated rodent droppings, so inhaling them. So that is a theory at the moment. We know that this Andes strain is very rare to be passed from human to human. And just as a reminder of the big picture, 3 people have died, so a Dutch couple, both aged 69, and a German passenger. 5 others are unwell. We know about Martin Anstey's. There's also a British national in hospital in Johannesburg, and the UK Health Security Agency confirming that 2 British passengers who travelled home independently, they are showing no symptoms, but they're self-isolating, as are their close contacts. And the MV Hondias left Cape Verde last night, heading to the Canaries. All 150 on board, asymptomatic. They'll be taking no risks. They'll check everyone's OK before repatriating them. But the overall message, low risk to the public.
Thanks very much.
Now, the polls are now open in the biggest set of elections since 2024, with millions of voters casting their ballots.
So we've got of course, parliamentary elections going on in Scotland and Wales. We've also got local councils in England, 5,000 seats on 136 local councils. So open at 7 a.m, polls closing at 10 p.m. tonight. I should say as well, of course, we're going to be having full election coverage too. Jonathan Samuels is going to be taking over from midnight for those first English council results coming in. I'm going to be here in the studio, actually, tomorrow from midday, and then we're going to get the majority of those English council results and also the results in Scotland and Wales coming through as well.
In the meantime, happy voting. Now, the US and Iran could be closing in on a deal, as President Trump says the war will be over quickly. He made the prediction as an American fighter jet shot an Iranian oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman. Meanwhile, Israel has struck Beirut for the first time since a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah was announced last month. President Trump is under pressure to reopen the Strait of Hormuz before his visit to China next week.
We're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon. We're not going to let that happen, and we won't let that happen. And so we're dealing with people that want to make a deal very much, and we'll see whether or not they can make a deal that's satisfactory to us. We have it very much under control. The blockade is unbelievable. The Navy's been incredible. The job they did, it's like a wall of steel. Nobody goes through. In particular, the Iranians, they're not getting anything through one way or the other, so they're out of business. And we'll see whether or not they are agreeing. And if they don't agree, they'll end up agreeing shortly thereafter. So that's the way it is.
Well, Sally Lockwood is in Dubai for us. Adam Parsons is in Jerusalem. Adam, Beirut hit overnight, the first time that Israel has done that since the ceasefire. Is that ceasefire now under pressure?
Well, the ceasefire has been a bit creaky ever since the start because, to be honest, the IDF have been striking targets in southern Lebanon on a very regular basis, and Hezbollah has been firing rockets back into northern Israel. So in that region, in the south of Lebanon, there's been a reduction in firing. There certainly hasn't been a cease in firing. But this is notable because this is the first time that the Israelis have gone for a target in Beirut. They've gone for the commander of the Radwan force, which is Hezbollah's, what is described as an elite force, who the Israelis blame for coordinating those attacks against northern Israel. First time they've done this for nearly a month. You'll remember the last strike on Beirut was an absolutely devastating one of 100 in 10 minutes. A lot of people were killed then. And I think this is symbolically important, and it also sort of slightly lifts the lid on what I think are the tensions between the Israeli government and the US government. It's very clear that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to go harder against Hezbollah. He thinks this is an opportunity to massively degrade Hezbollah's fighting power, and he is reluctant to stick to this ceasefire. Also, he is an arch politician. He's got an election coming up in 6 months' time, 5 months' time, actually, and he knows that his support in the north of Israel has ebbed a little bit because people there think that he hasn't been tough enough. So behind the scenes, I think it's very likely that the government here in Jerusalem told the White House that they were going to do or carry out this attack. Benjamin Netanyahu says that he talks to Donald Trump all the time, although notable that Donald Trump didn't seem to be mentioning Israel in quite the extent that he has done previously in his comments about Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. And I think there are plenty of people here in Israel who think that the deal that Donald Trump appears to be working on doesn't favour the Israelis in the way that they expected. I think not enough progress has been made. The fact that the Strait of Hormuz might be reopened, well, I mean, it was open before the war started, so that doesn't feel like progress hugely to a lot of people here. What they wanted was an end to the nuclear threat. Well, TBC. They wanted a massive reduction in Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. Certainly that's gone down, but it's quite possible that it could be built up again. And they wanted an end to funding Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and other groups in this region. And at the moment, that doesn't seem to be much on the table in these negotiations. So as much as anything, I think this airstrike on Beirut was a reminder to the Americans that we're still here, we still have power, and remember, we are your great friends in the region, as I'm sure the Israelis would like to see themselves, and we have demands that at the moment we don't feel are being met.
On the flip side, Sally, I guess the rhetoric has been much more encouraging in the last 24 hours, not least from President Trump, who suggested things could be over very quickly. And all of a sudden, we're starting to focus on the fact that he'll be in China next week, of course, following a meeting that the Iranians have with China too.
Yeah, that's right. Donald Trump is certainly talking up some sort of imminent diplomatic breakthrough. That's almost certainly an exaggeration. Donald Trump exaggerates a lot. When he launched the US blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, his intention was to try and choke Iran economically. Well, that blockade has been in place for more than 3 weeks now, and it's made very little difference in terms of any sign of Iran capitulating. Then, Project Freedom was launched with huge fanfare, only to be paused 2 days later. So I think we need to take what Donald Trump is saying with a pinch of salt, but certainly diplomacy, it does feel, is in motion again. And what we're talking about, according to US reports, is a one-pager, essentially a rough framework of what both sides could potentially discuss in another round of peace talks, and that both sides could lift the Strait of Hormuz over a 30-day period, in which time they would discuss other bigger issues such as the nuclear program, sanctions relief, etc. We'll have to see how this all plays out, but certainly China could now be playing a very interesting role behind the scenes, having met with Iran's foreign minister yesterday and with that bilateral summit between President Xi and Donald Trump scheduled for next week. But in some other interesting developments, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, their Navy have an X account, and they published a post last night suggesting that they could potentially reopen the Strait of Hormuz for maritime traffic before long. But then shortly after that, news came from US Central Command that one of America's fighter jets had disarmed an Iranian tanker in the Gulf of Oman that hadn't responded to multiple calls for them to stop trying to past the Strait of Hormuz. So that won't have gone down well, and I'm sure any goodwill from the Iranian side will have been thwarted by that move. But in one positive move, we could say, is that the UAE wasn't attacked yesterday as it was on Monday and Tuesday. Certainly the UAE bore the brunt of Iran's retaliation to Project Freedom. And in an interesting development, reporting from our partners NBC in America, they're saying that Saudi Arabia were angered by the launch of Project Freedom, which came as a surprise to America's Gulf allies, and that they withdrew their air bases and airspace for America to use in Project Freedom. So could that be another reason that this was all paused by Donald Trump? Either way, we're hearing reports that America is expecting some sort of response from the Iranians to their latest proposal in the next 48 hours. So we'll have to wait and see. Certainly, we're watching this very closely in terms of what this could all mean for diplomatic efforts. But for this region, it feels like we're back in a tense holding pattern, knowing that this war could go either way.
Sally, thank you very much indeed. We should say as well that we'll have more on all of these issues with our security and defence analyst, Michael Clark. In just a few moments' time, we'll be talking about Donald Trump's claim that the Iran war is going to be over quickly and trying to scrutinise it a bit.
And later on in the programme, Conservative peer and Times columnist Lord Finkelstein will be here to talk about the ongoing rise in anti-Semitism in Britain and the government's response to that. 9:30 for that one.
Now, of course, we've been talking for weeks now about how difficult it's been for oil and gas to get through the Strait of Hormuz. But, of course, what's now happening is that the world is turning to other countries, the West, to try and help fill the energy gap.
A record number of oil tankers are making their way to the US coast. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, visited the highest producing oil field in the US and sent this report.
They call this place the energy capital of the world. It is a major hub for oil, gas and petrochemicals. 10 large oil refineries, more than double the total in all of Britain, a port and a deep water shipping channel that makes this one of the key gateways for all that American oil. David Brazil has spent more than 20 years monitoring the numbers on America's energy industry. He's giving me a tour of the area. But one question looms large. How much more oil can America supply to the rest of the world?
Is this whole export operation kind of running as hot as it could?
No, it is not.
Oh, really?
No.
There's more that could be pumped.
We could still pump and export more.
Exports have jumped to a record high of 6 million barrels a day in April, partly due to emergency stockpile releases. But there is still room for more.
We estimate that on the Gulf Coast we have roughly 7 million barrels a day of export capacity.
So people in Europe wondering to themselves, okay, we've got this big shortage of oil and, petroleum products. Where is it going to come from? This place could be a big part of that answer.
This place could be a very big part for Europe specifically, actually.
That explains why, out on the high seas, we are witnessing a striking phenomenon. An armada of empty crude oil tankers turning west in record numbers. But extracting enough oil to help fill those tankers isn't as simple as you might think. One challenge is that whenever you get oil out of the ground, you also get gas. And strange as this will sound, in this case, that's actually a problem.
They're currently producing, somewhere in the neighborhood of 22.5 BCF a day of dry natural gas, which is more than there is capacity to get out of the Permian.
A lot of people will be killing themselves for, to have that much natural gas.
That's exactly right. And they are paying people to take it away. Last week, the price got to...
They're paying people to take it from them.
Negative $9 per MMBTU.
That is crazy.
It was wild.
Wow.
And so it's actually a cap on how much you want to produce crude because you can't do anything with the gas that's going to come out whether you like it or not.
So that's limiting their ability or willingness to pump the crude out of the ground.
Precisely.
Because there's too much gas and they don't have anywhere for that gas to go.
Yep.
So it just gets wasted. For me, from the UK, that's so frustrating. Because that presumably means we're not getting as much oil and gas as we could from America because the pipeline's not quite there yet.
Not quite there yet.
Well, Ed's going to be joining us next hour and in the 9 o'clock hour to talk a little bit more about that report and all of the latest movements in various business charts. Let's just give you a snapshot of the latest oil price, but also of Shell's results that just came out. Here's the oil price for you. Obviously, there's been that better news in terms of rhetoric, at least, in terms of hopes for a peace deal, and that has pulled the oil price back significantly. We're at 101 for Brent this morning, and this time last Thursday, we were in the sort of high 110s, if you're able to say that. I just did, but we got up to about 118. What a difference a week makes, back down to about 101. Obviously, clearly quite elevated. Before I move on to Shell results, just a reminder that the war took off at the end of February. So we've really only had elevated oil prices as it relates to Q1, January to March, in a third of the first quarter. It was only really elevated for the month of March when it comes to the first quarter. Let's have a look at Shell's profits. Just been announced for the first quarter. They came in at $6.9 billion. There it is. The yellow bar The previous quarter, Q4 of 2025, it came in at 3.2 billion, so more than doubled. Similar sort of size of move as BP's, which came out last week, if you remember when we brought you those. So Shell's profits more than doubling on a quarter where oil prices were only elevated because of the war for 1 month out of the 3. So the prospects of this going higher still are obviously very significant if oil prices remain elevated. Again, just worth noting, same theme as we got from BP last week, just all to a bigger scale. Shell's a bigger company. We're up a lot here for Shell, but we're not quite up at the levels that we saw during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And a big factor there is the persistence. Of course, that went on for many months, many quarters, so those elevated prices got locked in for more than just 1 month in a quarter. Interesting as well for both BP and Shell, but Shell particularly, given that it has a big operation in Qatar, an LNG operation, is the price increase far outweighs any disruption to supply that we've seen, and it's allowed the profits to go up. And on the note of their Qatar LNG facility in Ras Laffan, they did say it's going to take them about a year to repair that facility in full. You might remember Ed and I actually talking about the Ras Laffan site and the fact that that had got hit early on in the hostilities. It's going to take them a full year. That speaks to how long, even if we get a peace deal, oil prices may stay persistently higher. Not to the 100+ levels, but even if we get full peace, maybe it won't go back to where it started the year in January at 60 or 70. And that's something that we're going to keep an eye on, how long the sort of long-term effects of it are. But just to finish off on what might happen to Shell's earnings going forward, we only had 1 month of elevated prices in Q1. In fact, the average oil price for the whole of Q1 was 80. We're now 2 months into... Oh, we've switched completely there. We're now 2 months into, of course, Q2, which they'll report in 3 months' time. And clearly, they've had at least 2 months now of elevated oil prices and prices higher than the average of Q1. So that profit chart that we did just show you, it's going to go higher still, at least for 1 quarter. We'll see where it goes from there, Sophie.
Wilf, explaining there the details of those results coming through. Now, we're going to talk next about a very worrying trend. I mean, it's not really a trend, I'll be honest. I think it is an existing problem that isn't changing, and that is the number of women who feel their pain is being ignored or dismissed by their doctor. New research shows more women are turning to unverified health information online because they're trying to find out what's going on and what's wrong. Let's just have a quick look at some of the numbers before we get to our guests. So more than half of women in the UK feel their pain is ignored or dismissed, and that rises to 73% among women aged between 18 and 24, so younger women in particular. And probably as a result of this, 3/4 of women are turning to unverified sources for medical support, and 94% then acting on that advice. Well, let's speak to the Chief Executive of the Fawcett Society at Penny East, who joins us now. Great to have you here. Why do you think it is that women's pain is being dismissed in this way?
You say it's not a new trend, is it? It's something that's really well established. Unfortunately, sexism and misogyny are rife in wider society, and it's absolutely apparent in the NHS as well, and within kind of wider society in terms of health services. Women having their pain dismissed, 1 and 2, really means that they feel undervalued, that they don't feel listened to, and it can have huge impacts on their health outcomes.
I'm really interested to see the race split on this as well. We've done quite a lot of work on childbirth in particular, and the awful outcomes that black women in particular have. And it shows in this research as well, doesn't it? That actually, people from different race backgrounds, non-white backgrounds, feel that their pain is ignored and dismissed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really important to reflect that women aren't one homogenous group. We all have different identities, whether that be race, whether that be class, whether that be age. And when those identities intersect, quite often the health outcomes are even worse.
And I guess is that because people have more prejudices, or I guess combined prejudices, or expectations when it comes to, A, if you're a woman, but B, if you're black as well?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, unfortunately, every single workforce comes with those prejudices. Those prejudices exist in society. What we need is interventions to unpick those biases. So better training, better education, and better resources. Because when people come to work, they come to work with their own prejudices, their own biases, their own value set. And it requires real investment to make sure that those are unpicked.
When we're talking about women's pain, I guess we think quite a lot about period-related pain, right? So you think about when you first get your period, you've got no idea what's normal, what's not normal. The number of people who wait for years to get a diagnosis of endometriosis. Do you think things are at least improving a little bit because we are talking about things a bit more, like, you know, saying the word period on air, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there is a kind of lifting of some of that stigma where we're talking about things in a way that we certainly didn't 5 or 10 years ago. And that's really excellent to see. That kind of awareness, though, does need to kind of feed through to the health system in a far more, in a far greater way. I mean, there are tools available. There is a pain pass available online that can help women to be able to vocalise and understand their pain. So when they go to the GP, they've got it in their kind of back pocket, how to communicate it, how often it is happening, and what is the impact on their daily life. And that's really important because I know what it feels like to leave the GP and to think, I just didn't feel I was listened to in there. I just did not get the result that I wanted, and that real feeling of dismissal. So it's really important to support women to communicate their pain effectively.
We mentioned in the introduction the statistics showing women looking to other sources, like unverified sources, like, you know, asking ChatGPT or Claude or whatever to diagnose you. In a way, I guess that's bad because, you know, these are unofficial sources. They might give you the inaccurate information. But is it also potentially quite a good thing, I guess, that people are able to do a bit more research themselves and perhaps go into their GP with a few more questions to ask?
I think with AI, the thing about AI, isn't it, is it's there whenever you need it. It certainly isn't rushing you out the door after 10 minutes. It is there for you, whether it's 3 in the morning, and it will talk to you for as long as you want. I think the concern is the bias is embedded within that data already, so the information can't be relied on. And also sometimes AI just makes it up if it doesn't know what the answer is. So there's some real risks about the how much you can trust the information being given.
I'm interested, you said there about the bias already in AI, because I guess that's it. It's a kind of reflection of our own foils and prejudices, if you like. I just wondered if you could unpick that a little bit more. What kind of biases do you think are there?
Yeah, so it's just looking at information sources and how often information comes up. So, for example, with a heart attack, quite often you would think that the symptom was physical pain, like a sharp pain in your chest. Actually, for women, one of the most common symptoms early on is nausea, but that just isn't going to come up because it's not as common as that sharp pain. So the problem with AI is it just repeats the information. It's learning from itself. So those kinds of biases get further entrenched, and it's really important that it's not an objective tool, I guess what I'm saying.
Really interesting. Thank you so much for coming on the programme and talking us through that.
Much more to come here on Mornings. After the break, we're going to be talking to Professor Michael Clark, discussing the very latest in the Middle East.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News. The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Welcome back. Let's turn back to the war in Iran once again, and obviously encouraging comments around possible peace talks. Meanwhile, Action does continue to say that that might be a long way off. Let's talk about it all with our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark. Michael, great to see you as always. Yeah. Stepping back a little bit from today to the week's events, interested in your take. Obviously, there was Operation Epic Fury, then there was briefly this operation to try and escort boats out of the Strait of Hormuz. How hard was that for the US to actually deliver? Or could they have done had everyone wanted it to continue?
Well, Operation Freedom, to get boats or ships out of the Strait of Hormuz, was a very big operation. CENTCOM had been working on it for a long time. They'd worked on it secretly to demine a channel around the coast of UAE and Oman, and it was ready to go. It had taken them a long time to put it together because it was a three-stage plan to work inland in Iran, to actually stop anything moving, to then put a dome, as they called it, over the straits itself so that nothing in the straits could threaten any ships moving out, and then to move ships out in a cleared channel. They worked on it a lot, and they began it. They got 2 American-flagged cargo ships out with a couple of American destroyers shepherding them out. And they thought that was the beginning of it. Pete Hegseth said, was it 2 days, 48 hours ago, he said, right, hundreds of ships are now waiting to go through. And within a couple of hours, President Trump had said, no, we're not doing that.
So I guess my reason for asking with that point is, do you think, therefore, it stopped because it couldn't or wasn't going to work, or because there was diplomatic pressure, whether it was from the Saudis, whether it's ahead of his trip to China? Why did President Trump stop pursuing that plan when, obviously, as you say, there'd been so much work going into it?
Yeah, I think probably 2 things. One is that it wasn't obviously going to reassure the tanker owners and the crews to give it a go. The idea was, once they see it working, they'll all want to get out, so they will. But we all thought it was a bit of a long shot because it would have to get 1,500 tankers out and then more tankers back in. There's lots of empty tankers out there waiting to go back into the Gulf to load up again to resume trade. So it was always going to be a long process, and it was a big operation. But I think against that too was the sense that President Trump feels boxed in for diplomatic reasons, and this summit he's going to in China next week, I think, looms large for him. He didn't want to go with this thing unresolved. And, he always expresses diplomacy as if it's a game of cards, as if it's a poker match. And if that's the case, then he looks as if he's folding. He looks as if he's just decided he's got to fold, at least for now. Now, you never predict. Because, even this week, we've gone round a complete circle inside 48 hours. And, my heart goes out to the planners at CENTCOM, Central Command. They're in Tampa and in Doha, the forward base in the Gulf. They must be banging their heads on the desk. All the planning they do, and it's just undercut in a Truth Social post, and everything goes into a different direction. They must wonder, what are we supposed to do with this sort of political direction that we're not getting?
What's your sense on how optimistic or not we should be about these peace talks?
Oh, I think we've arrived at the point where the United States is desperate to get out and is looking for a way out that can be presented as somehow better than the 2015 deal, which is what Trump departed from, and he wrecked that deal in 2018. And so he's got to find a way of making the deal he might now come to, at least an interim deal, a 30-day ceasefire where they talk about lots of things. In reality, it will look spookily like the 2015 deal, but in slightly worse conditions because the Iranians now have a more hardline leadership than they had in 2015. They now know how easy it is to block the Strait of Hormuz, to make them unnavigable very, very easily, which they couldn't have done in 2015. The technologies are different. Against that, one advantage is that Iranian nuclear facilities are much more destroyed, much less able to reconstruct themselves. So the Iranians are some years away from reconstructing their facilities, but that doesn't stop somebody like North Korea or Russia giving them stuff in the future. And so the threat will remain there. And the Iranians will say, you know, we have no desire to make a nuclear weapon. They've always said that. We know they're lying. They know they're lying. And we'll pretend that we believe them this time. We won't, but we'll pretend we do. And we'll go back to the old process. There's an old phrase in diplomacy, if you can't solve a problem, you manage it. We couldn't solve the Iranian nuclear problem back in 2010, 2011, 2012. And so the world managed it, and it was managing it quite successfully. Now President Trump is discovering the same thing. He can't solve the problem, but he's going to have to manage it. He's going to have to make that management process look somehow different to the one we had before.
Is there another point, or is this not fair, that Iran, both economically and militarily, is much weaker than it was?
Yeah, undoubtedly.
And that, if peace is temporarily held, is a positive, at least for a number of years, if not for a number of decades?
Yes. I don't know about decades, but President Trump could certainly say, look, Iran is much weaker than it was, much weaker. And that's certainly true. But the leadership is stronger. So, you know, he's got a less pliable group of Revolutionary Guard leaders there now. And I do think there will be a reckoning between the population and the government in Iran. I mean, the situation for ordinary Iranians, you know, 90 million of them, and at least 70 million, probably 80 million of them, but at least 70 million of that 90 million, they hate the government, they hate them. And there will be a reckoning, but probably not soon, maybe in a couple of years, maybe 4 or 5 years. There will be a reckoning. And when that reckoning comes, I'm sure it will be very violent, which it might not have been before. But it will occur. I think, you know, President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu will get their regime change, but probably not while they're in office. It'll come down the road. There will be a new Iran emerging out of this because Iran is in such dire straits economically compared to where it was a year ago.
You mentioned there President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm just interested because obviously before you were talking about how America wants an off-ramp, right? They want to get out of it. What does Israel want now?
Yeah, they don't want the war to stop because Israel's got its own war. So this war within a war is Israel's war on Hezbollah to once and for all hit Hezbollah so hard it will demolish it. And Hezbollah is Israel's main opposition, really. I mean, Israel has never bothered too much about Hamas. It suited them to have Hamas in Gaza because it kept the Palestinians split. They're never much worried about the Houthis, who are just a nuisance from their point of view in Yemen. They worried a lot about Iran because Iran was their big problem. And they think if the Iranian problem has now been at least mitigated by the destruction, now their main problem remains Hezbollah. And Israel wants to carry on. This process that we've seen this week has gone on without any real consultation with Israel. And so two things are happening. One is that Benjamin Netanyahu is seeking reassurances from the Trump administration that they won't give in too much, that they will stick to a tough plan on nuclear negotiations, and that getting the highly enriched uranium out of Iran, this 400 kilos or so of highly enriched uranium, must leave Iran to some third country. That's probably going to happen. And that's very, very important to the Israelis. So they've got their issues that they want to press, but they're not in a good position. If Trump needs to make the deal before he goes to China, which he probably does, which is next week, he'll tell the Israelis, you've got to cool it in Lebanon, because the Israelis can be spoilers to what is going on between Tehran and Washington. And the Israelis are very anxious now, I think, to do as much as they can against Hezbollah in the 4 or 5 days they've got left before they're told they must stop.
I wanted to ask, Michael, just quickly about your view of the US and China's meeting next week and the extent to which Taiwan will be a discussion point, as opposed to potentially a military target for China, and whether it's even plausible that President Trump is willing to sacrifice Taiwan over a very long-term time horizon in order to get some kind of agreement with President Xi on other areas?
Yeah, it's entirely plausible. I mean, in the first Trump administration, Fiona Hill, you remember who the British analyst who worked in the first Trump administration, she said very openly, she said that President Trump made it pretty clear to China then that Taiwan was an issue, but it shouldn't stand in the way of better relations between the United States and China and sorting out the trade imbalance between them. I think there's a general sense in China that Trump will not fight a war for Taiwan. On the other hand, the Chinese, they don't want to invade Taiwan. They will if they have to. But what they're doing is I call it the anaconda strategy. They're trying to squeeze Taiwan with military deployments around it. They want to indicate to Taiwan that they're isolated, and sooner or later, Taiwan, it would be better if you made a political decision to come back into the fold. Make it now before it gets worse, before we need to invade you. And I think that's the nature of China's policy, and that's probably a 10-year policy now. Xi Jinping used to say that he wanted it resolved before he stepped down, which is 2027. But he's clearly not going to step down in 2027. He's going for a fourth term at least. So I think we've got until 2031 before it has to be resolved in his mind.
Well, it wasn't even meant to be 2027.
No.
Of course. So,
it's only 2 terms originally.
Yeah.
I mean, like all dictators, they fix the constitution and just keep going extra terms, which he will do. I'm sure he will.
As always, Michael, a pleasure. Thanks so much. We'll chat with Michael again later on in the programme.
Thank you. Now, the former England rugby captain Lewis Moody has said that nothing could have prepared him for the aftermath of revealing his diagnosis of motor neuron disease.
In his first broadcast interview since going public about the illness, he told Sky Sports he gets emotional about the level of support he's received.
Your brain is just given a piece of information that changes your outlook on the future. And actually that allows you real clarity around how you approach day-to-day living and doing.
Winning all your life has sort of been about coming first, hasn't it? What does winning on a daily basis mean to you?
Oh, wow. When do I feel? That's an excellent question. When I feel at ease, at peace, I've recognised, whereas the athlete mindset is everything about pushing and driving, it's almost the exact opposite with MND.
Is there a time, Lewis, when you don't think about it?
Yeah. Normally totally distracted, playing touch. I don't feel any different because I can do everything that I want to still. So I don't dwell on the future, not that those thoughts don't come into my mind, because they do. Whenever I get emotional is when I think about the support that people are giving, the love that I've felt, that we felt. That's when even now, you just...
It's your trigger.
Yeah, it is. If I talk about myself, I can talk quite frankly, quite pragmatically about it all. But if I talk about, always hits me again. It's weird. Because you're not given any information initially, and it feels unbelievably negative, and all the noise around it is negative, and all your thought process is negative. But actually, when you sit down with other specialists and other people in that space that have been operating in there for a long time, and they start giving you information, and you start realizing that, no one individual is obviously the same. No person's experience of it is the same. The time that progression takes is different for everyone.
The strength, you said, is still there. So it was originally in the shoulder, and it's become a little bit weaker since the initial diagnosis?
Yeah, so absolutely, yeah. So the back of the shoulder was where it started and where it continues. And I suppose, in terms of the uncertainty piece that I talked about earlier, is that one of the things that the specialist said is that, where it starts, it likely continues. So, so it obviously has, I've lost more in the shoulder, but not significantly.
Okay.
A week or two ago, I had loss of strength in middle fingers, and that hit me really hard because it coincided with, a couple of difficult conversations. And so I had 2 days of, mentally feeling hit. But then you quickly come out of it.
What's the thing that makes you saddest?
If you dwell on the future and the assumption that, you will experience certain things. We all think we'll reach a certain place or things we'll see and be involved in. So you know, the things that you will miss, that, you know, yeah.
So you're getting back on your bike now, aren't you?
Yeah, attempting to. I've done a challenge every year since I retired, sometimes more than one. And I was like, look, I don't know how much time, you know, you have left in this physical state, so we need to kind of get it in as quickly as possible. So there's a slightly selfish element to it. But having done the Ed ride and having been with Jono and all the guys again, it was wicked. But for me, it was about doing as much as I could. For the first time ever, I had to get off. And that
what was that moment like? 'Cause
it was horrible, actually. But, you know, the support from Cozza and Jono happened to be there at the time. And they were like, mate, you got to stop. Just get off. No, you don't need to continue. Just get off. And yeah, that was lovely.
I asked you earlier what winning looks like for you.
I suppose it's you know, you reframe what winning is. You know, you've always had that. Anything you've done has been competitive about how do you overcome it, how do you beat it. You know, so there's still a part of that for me with this, you know, and maybe a lot of that comes back to the connection to the charity focus that we're having and Doddy's. And, you know, I've felt from day one, since speaking to Kenny and a couple of the other lads, that they've almost gone, mate, here you go, you're in off the bench for this, you know. We've done the hard work. Now you get the rest of it done. You know, winning looks like just, I've got a wonderful purpose. And I described it the other day, just when I was at the dinner. It's like, for the last 15 years, you feel like you've not had a proper fight to get into. Like your teeth have been a little bit blunt. You're happily just getting on in Bradford and Avon. But now all of a sudden you've got that, like, almost reinvigorated. It's like,
something.
Yeah.
The old Lewis.
Yeah.
Really fantastic piece that with a real legend there, with Lewis Moody, the former England rugby captain. We're gonna have a quick look at the weather now.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
So it's looking a bit cool and cloudy over the next couple of days. Mainly dry, which is a good bit, but there will be a risk of showers and some of them will be heavy as well. England and Wales will be mostly dry. There'll be sunny spells this morning as well, although the south-east and the west might just catch the odd light shower. It's another story, though, in Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland, which will see showers developing more widely. Some more general showery rain will then move into the increasingly windy northwest by lunchtime. It will be quite cool again as well after a local frost.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Coming up next, we'll speak to the photojournalist Kiana Hayeri, who's just won a significant award.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them.
It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis,
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything. It's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island. The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here. In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Welcome back. As we focus our attention, of course, on the Strait of Hormuz, on the impact of the Iran war on global economies, it's important not to forget, of course, the real casualties of the conflict, the communities on the ground around the world that are living through it.
Well, our next guest is someone who's really seen the impact of war firsthand in Afghanistan and photographed it. She just won a fellowship for her work as well. And we're delighted to say that the photojournalist Kiana Hayari joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us. Congratulations on winning the award as well. Just talk us a little bit through your photography. You spent a lot of time in Afghanistan then. How did that come about?
Yeah, I lived in Afghanistan for about 10 years and I've done a lot of work on the front line, but also many times I stayed behind to photograph the impact of the war on people. And organically, after Taliban took over, a lot of my work shifted to impact of that change in the society and mostly on women and young girls.
And hopefully we should be able to see some of your images as well. This is an explosion from a window, is it then?
Yes, this is actually, tomorrow is going to be the 5th anniversary of the Sayyid al-Shuhada school attack. This was in May 8th, 2021, a short few months before Taliban took over. And there was a triple explosion outside of a girls' school where about more than 90 girls aged 11 to 17 were killed. And it's really the foundation of where I am now and what I'm going to be doing during this fellowship.
And the fellowship is obviously the Sahari Evans Global Fellowship following the event yesterday. I'm looking at some damaged textbooks there. How much do you think there is an importance of still photography like this in an age of not just the amazing work you do to be on the scene in these dangerous places, but in an age of AI with videos created out of nothing?
That's a very good question. I still think still images, the way they capture a moment, they freeze a moment, they're very, very important. Even though our brains are really trained to look through, scroll through videos on TikTok, on social media, I think it's important to freeze a moment and it has a different impact. And it's also the way we experience photographs. Most of the time it's on a small screen, but when you have the opportunity to get up close on larger screen and be able to sit with it in a book or an exhibition, it has a very different impact.
I mean, just looking at some of them now, it's absolutely chilling and very, very powerful. This is a man laying his cousins to rest?
No, it's actually this is the funeral after the school attack. So there were many young bodies brought up the hill. It was one of the most I don't even know how to describe it, but it was like small coffins coming one after another in the train. So this was the funeral. I think there were dozens of girls who were buried on that hill.
It's just unbelievable,
yeah.
And it must have had a massive impact on you having to cover this and see this as well. Can I talk about what you're doing now? Because I think it's so interesting that you're talking about how women and girls are currently doing in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
And you were saying it all started from that school bombing with all those little bodies. I guess it must be very painful and heartbreaking in a way to see how little progress has been made, right? You know, that women and girls are still in this situation in Afghanistan.
Yes. It is heartbreaking, but I will also remind us that there's still stuff happening under the skin of the city. There's still schools operating in secret, and these are like from small-scale schools in people's living rooms, or I've been to schools where there are 700 high school students going to.
This is a secret school.
This is a secret school. This is in the basement in Kandahar.
I didn't even know that.
This is incredible.
Yes, but I also have been to schools that there are 700 high school students, and it's a technically quote-unquote underground, but it's not. It's 700 students, so they obviously find a way to operate.
So we've got only about a minute left, but when you take these photos, you must have to then really protect your film and smuggle it back out of the countries, or is it all digital and you upload it straight away? It's all digital. Sorry, that was a very basic.
No.
Basic question. But I guess so. You're able to upload it and they're not tracked, your uploads.
No, I have it on hard drives. No, it's okay. There's no stupid question. Like, it's just I mean, digital. I have it's on hard drives, multiple. I keep them in separate places. They're all encrypted, and sometimes, depend on the story, sometimes I get them out. But
we are out of time. Sorry, I shortchanged you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us. Thanks for being with us.
A British expedition guide who was on the cruise ship hit with Hantavirus speaks to Sky News and reveals he's isolating in hospital after falling ill.
Donald Trump says the war in Iran will be over quickly as he looks to pressure Iran into agreeing a deal.
Beirut is hit by Israel for the first time since the ceasefire.
Also today, former England rugby captain Lewis Moody talks about his fight against motor neuron disease and how the diagnosis has affected him.
Yeah, we all think we'll reach a certain place or things we'll see and be involved in. So, you know, the things that you will miss.
Good morning. A British hantavirus patient has told Sky News he's isolating in hospital after being evacuated from the cruise ship at the centre of the outbreak.
Martin Anstey, an expedition guide on board the MV Hondius, was speaking from his hospital bed in the Netherlands. 2 other British people are now self-isolating in the UK for up to 8 weeks, but are not currently showing any symptoms. Emma's here with us, and in the past few minutes there's been a further update from the Spanish Health Ministry.
Yes, so 3 people were evacuated from the ship yesterday. Now, one of them was Martin, but there were 2 others as well. One was a Dutch colleague of Martin, 41 years old, and a German passenger who was 69. Now, we know that 2 of the people made it to the Netherlands to be treated, Martin one of them, but 1 had their journey delayed and they were actually diverted to the Canaries. And this is the update. So Spanish Health Ministry saying the person with symptoms who was on the plane in Gran Canaria since yesterday has finally been transferred to Amsterdam on a new medical plane, different from the one that was initially in Gran Canaria. At all times, the operation is being carried out following the established health and safety protocols in coordination with the competent authorities and the company responsible for the transfer. So all of them now being treated in the Netherlands. As for Martin, 56 years old, it was thought that he was a ship's doctor. Actually, he was an expedition leader, a retired police officer. He told our colleague last night that he's doing OK, he's having lots of tests. The doctors expect to have a clearer picture how he is by later in this week. His wife, Nicola, has spoken to The Telegraph, has described it as a very traumatic few days, unsurprisingly. And apparently, Martin has been up and down. He started with mild symptoms. It became very serious, but now he's stable and very relieved to be off the ship. So he's being treated now. Now, we know that all of this has been linked by anonymous officials in Argentina with a birdwatching trip to a landfill site in Argentina. So this is right at the beginning of this cruise. And it's thought that when they were doing this birdwatching, they somehow came into contact with Hantavirus, which is usually spread by contaminated rodent droppings or urine. It can be airborne. And the Andes strain of Hantavirus is rare, really rare to be spread between humans. It has to be incredibly close contact. And we know that 3 people have died. So this couple, 69 years old, a Dutch couple, and a German passenger, 5 others are unwell. So we've heard about Martin and the other 2 there, but also there's a British man in Johannesburg who's being treated. And the UK Health Security Agency also confirming that 2 people had actually flown home independently earlier in the trip, British people, asymptomatic. They are isolating, as are their close contacts. And meanwhile, the MV Hondius, this ship, is on its way now to the Canary Islands, expected to arrive at the weekend, about 150 people on board, none of them with any symptoms, but they'll be taking no risks. So there'll be all the checks before they're repatriated.
Thanks very much, Emma.
Now, moving on, then, polls are open as we see some of the biggest sets of votes since 2024, with millions casting their ballots today.
Yes, they've been open for about an hour and 4 minutes, to be exact. They'll shut at 10 p.m. And, of course, we've got the local council elections in England. In Scotland and Wales, people are electing representatives to their national parliaments as well. So it is a bumper set of elections. We'll have full coverage, of course, from 10 o'clock tonight. Jonathan Samuels will be with you from midnight, taking everyone through some of those early council results as they come in. I'll be with you then tomorrow from midday as the bulk of the English council results, but then also the Wales and Scotland results start to come in all the way through until 7 p.m. when you've got Cathy Newman.
Now, the US and Iran could be closing in on a deal as President Trump says the war will be over quickly. He made the prediction as an American fighter jet shot an Iranian oil tanker off the Gulf of Oman. Meanwhile, Israel struck Beirut for the first time since a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah was announced last month. We're just hearing from the Israeli military that Hezbollah has launched rockets towards the IDF in South Lebanon over the past few hours.
We're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon. We're not going to let that happen, and we won't let that happen. And so we're dealing with people that want to make a deal very much, and we'll see whether or not they can make a deal that's satisfactory to us. We have it very much under control. The blockade is unbelievable. The Navy's been incredible. The job they did is like a wall of steel. Nobody goes through. In particular, the Iranians, they're not getting anything through one way or the other, so they're out of business. And we'll see whether or not they are agreeing. And if they don't agree, they'll end up agreeing shortly thereafter. So that's the way it is.
Well, Sally Lockwood is in Dubai, Adam Parsons in Jerusalem for us. Let's get to Adam first, because there's been this strike, of course, on Beirut. What is the status of the ceasefire?
Well, there isn't really a ceasefire in a meaningful term of the word, because in the south of Lebanon, there has been a constant exchange of fire between the IDF, which is occupying a huge swathe of the south of Lebanon, and Hezbollah, which continues to attack Israeli soldiers and continues to try to fire rockets into northern Israel. So in that area, there is still a conflict. It's on a lower level than it was before. Just now, the IDF has said that Hezbollah has fired rockets towards its troops in southern Lebanon. It said that they landed adjacent to the troop. Yesterday, it said one of its soldiers was seriously wounded and others were injured. It's also said that it has attacked what it describes as Hezbollah infrastructure in the south of Lebanon. So that's still an area of conflict. When we were up in northern Israel just a few days ago, you stand near the border and you can hear the booms, you can hear machine gun fire, you can see big plumes of smoke rising. So there isn't any peace there. What happened late last night was an Israeli airstrike on a target in Beirut, which was focused upon the leader, the commander of what's called the Radwan force. Now, that is the elite military unit within Hezbollah, which is set up in order to pursue combat operations, not a defensive, but in other words, to try to orchestrate attacks on northern Israel. Soldiers who have fought alongside Russians, let's say, and Syrians who have combat experience. Probably about 2,500 or 3,000 of these. And within Hezbollah, this is considered the sort of acme of their attacking troops. It's not the first time that Israelis have attacked the commander of the Radwan force. It's a job where this sort of attack on your life is to be expected. And almost immediately after this attack, there was a joint statement from Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel Katz, the defense minister, which I can summarize as saying, we'll come after you wherever you are. The enemies of Israel will track you down. Now, this is important because at the same time that Israel is launching this symbolic attack into Beirut, you were just saying that Iran and the United States seem to be coming up with some formulation of words that means a cessation in hostilities. And I think what you are seeing is a difference between what the White House is going to consider success and what the Israelis want. The Israelis clearly would like to continue combat operations in Lebanon. An official told me that status quo is simply not an option. They are determined to wipe out Hezbollah. They're determined that Iran stops funding Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis. They want a massive degradation of Iran's ballistic missile capabilities, and clearly they want the end of anything that could lead to nuclear weapons. Really, the Israelis want the end of the Iranian regime in any meaningful sense. And they seem to think that the US is going sort of soft on that. The US is talking about sanctions relief, is talking about regime change, which I don't think convinces everybody here, and seems to be not talking about these links between Iran and groups like Hezbollah. And we are in a very complicated political environment. Netanyahu has got an election in October. Donald Trump is going out to China to see President Xi. He's got midterms, so he wants to come up with something that looks like a victory. And the Iranians, very sophisticated negotiators, are playing a long game. So it's only one airstrike on Beirut, the first one for nearly a month. But symbolically, it does feel to me as if it has considerable weight.
Adam, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Let's bring in Sally. Sally, clearly very encouraging rhetoric from the president overnight. Is that positivity being felt across the region in terms of prospects of a peace deal or a meaningful ceasefire?
Hello to you, Wilf. I mean, across this region, it really does feel like we've been here so many times before. Donald Trump talking up some sort of diplomatic breakthrough, referring to it as almost imminent. It certainly is exaggeration, I'm sure of it. That said, there is a real sense of encouragement that Donald Trump is now focusing on diplomacy once again. Despite clear violations of the ceasefire this week, the UAE attacked with missiles and drones on Monday and Tuesday by Iran. That didn't result in the ceasefire collapsing, as many feared. And now, of course, this news that Iran is considering this one-page memorandum of understanding that has been put to them by the US, which is a rough framework of how a potential another round of peace talks would go. That's certainly been very welcome news indeed. And we understand that within that framework, there would be a lifting of the blockades on the Strait of Hormuz from both sides over a 30-day period in which they would discuss much more complex issues such as the nuclear program, sanctions relief, etc. So we'll have to wait and see how this goes. Certainly the Iranian foreign minister was in China yesterday. China is a key strategic and economic ally with Iran. Their crude imports are heavily reliant on the Strait of Hormuz. So they, no doubt, are playing a very significant role behind the scenes. And Donald Trump will not want this situation hanging over him when he flies to China next week to meet with President Xi. There were some encouraging signs yesterday. The IRGC's Navy has an X account, and they posted to suggest that they were going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz for maritime traffic. But shortly after that, there was an update from US Central Command to say that they'd shot out the rudder of an Iranian tanker who'd failed to comply with their orders to stop when they were trying to pass the Strait of Hormuz. So it's still an extremely tense and volatile situation, and we know that a misstep could change anything at any given moment. Nevertheless, the UAE was not attacked with missiles and drones yesterday, as we saw on Monday and Tuesday. That is encouraging. But some reporting from our partners at NBC News say that Saudi was angered by this announcement of Project Freedom, and that it came as a surprise to America's Gulf allies who had no idea about this operation, and that Saudi announced they would no longer be offering their air bases and airspace for the US military to use for this operation. Could that have resulted in Operation Freedom, Project Freedom being paused? We don't know, but certainly it's a suggestion that there's a bit of a strain in relations between Gulf states and America, who I'm sure are running out of patience when it comes to this war, the impact that it's having on their countries, not just in terms of security, but also economically. Now, we're hearing from American reports that they're expecting, or they're hoping for, a response from the Iranians in the next 48 hours to their latest proposal. So we're going to be watching that extremely closely, because certainly for people in this region, they feel like they've been here before, that it's another tense holding pattern, knowing that the war could still go either way at any given moment.
Sally, thank you very much indeed. Well, we're, of course, continuing our coverage of the local elections in England and those national elections in Wales and Scotland. I'm just bringing you some pictures of Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, outcasting his vote in the last few minutes. There he is, holding hands with his wife, Victoria, making his way to the polling station. And we'll bring you all the party leaders as they vote. Of course, we're being extra scrupulous to be balanced, of course, this being polling day. And there he is on the way out. And now, I should say, there is a tradition in British politics of people sharing pictures of their dogs outside the polling station, maybe kind of on the lead outside as they go in and vote. The Prime Minister didn't bring a dog with him, but if you do, send it to us. We want to see them, and then we're going to put the best ones on TV as well, mornings at sky.uk. Got a dog, Wolf?
No, my brother does. I'm actually going to text him.
So, yeah, see if you can get one in.
Send a picture of Lenny by the polling station. I doubt he's this is rather harsh to reveal this. He's probably not going to vote because he's not very organised, my brother, but he can still take a picture of Lenny.
Yeah, well, maybe that will prompt him to get out.
Yeah, maybe it will.
There you go.
We shall see. Hopefully we'll bring a picture of Lenny to you during the course of the show. In fact, we're going to either way now, whether he's at a polling station or not.
There you go. I want to see it.
We've teased it up. Now, let's turn back to the war in Iran and the apparent progress on peace talks. Our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark, is here. Michael, great to see you, as always. Optimistic on talk of peace talks, or is it as hard as ever to get the genie back in the bottle?
Well, no, optimistic that there will now be quite a long pause. I think this idea of a 30-day ceasefire to discuss the modalities of what they're going to do, they've got 14 points on a one-pager or a two-pager, that's just a framework. But President Trump is desperate to find a way out of this. He's more desperate to get out of it than the IRGC are in Iran. And so I think there will be a 30-day pause. I think I'm optimistic about that. We seem to have arrived at that point. Whether the war will be back on again after that, I think, as Sally Lockwood was saying, is still a possibility. Because you never know. I mean, President Trump, flip-flops from war to peace. But he seems to be now in this frame that he's got to find a way out. He can't go to China next week, 14th and 15th, with this war hanging over him and the Strait of Hormuz still closed, because the Chinese, although they're insulated from many of the effects of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, because they've got such big strategic reserves of everything, although that is the case, they're very upset about this closure because it's harming the world economy, so it's harming their economy.
It's interesting, isn't it? You saying that, the kind of off-ramp, if you like, and the desire to bring it to an end. Is something different happening with Israel? We've obviously seen that strike on Beirut.
Yeah, that's the war within a war. I mean, Adam Parsons was saying there, the Israelis don't want an end to this war because they have their own agenda, which is to get rid of Hezbollah from Lebanon once and for all. Now, they probably can't do that, but they could suppress Hezbollah to the point where it's less of a problem than it has been for some years. And the Israelis have not been party to these negotiations that seem suddenly now to have emerged between the United States and Iran. And the Israelis are sort of holding on to the coattails of the United States, hoping that they will not be told, as I think they will be sometime next week, to stop. And I think they're going to do as much as they can, as much damage as they can to Hezbollah between now and whenever that day is next week, when they're told that they have to stop. But they don't like it because they have their own agenda and they're pushing that agenda pretty hard under the cover of the general war. And of course, as Adam was saying, they want the Iranians to be as weakened as possible. They'd love a regime change in Iran, but they're not going to get that in the short term now. But if Iran is humbled and if its military effectiveness is so drastically reduced, then that certainly plays to Israel's longer-term agenda.
Can I ask a completely different question? Maybe we'll come back to the Middle East in a second and get your latest take on Russia and Ukraine. Because I've seen different reports that either Ukraine's suddenly on the back foot, but then suddenly Russia, Putin's terrified of being assassinated and is hiding under the table. What's your latest assessment of? Yeah, on the battlefield, the Ukrainians are doing very well. They've brought forward all their new drones, and they've got this the FP1s and 2s, the 5.1s and 2s, the FP5
which is now the Flamingo, is doing some real damage behind the lines. And what the Ukrainians have managed to do is stabilise the front lines. The Russian offensive, which began 6 weeks ago now, has gone nowhere. So the Ukrainians, they're not going to take more territory. They have taken back some villages, but they're not going to break through the Russian lines. But the Russians can't get anywhere. And the offensive, because it's going badly for the Russians, that's surfaced a lot of issues in Moscow that they say Putin is now spending very little time in the Kremlin. He's hiding away. He's more isolated than ever. I think there's a bit of wishful thinking behind all of that. But undoubtedly, this is the year in which Russia would find it very difficult to continue the war were it not for President Trump in the White House making things easy for him. That's the irony of it all. Going to the fifth year of the war, the Russians are struggling to sustain it in the way that they have done so far.
I mean, it is extraordinary, really, when you take a step back, isn't it? How, you know, the Ukrainians have managed to resist in this way. And it's interesting hearing you talk there about the technology, because it feels like the technology and Ukraine being at the cutting edge of that, really developing at this rapid pace when it comes to warfare.
Yeah.
Where is the UK positioned in that? Are we in the race or not?
We're in the race scientifically, and in research terms, we're working a lot with Ukraine, but we're nowhere in terms of scale and amount. We've got lots of good technologies, but they're not on the battlefield, and they're not going to be for a long time, and they're not going to be in any significant numbers. What the Ukrainians have shown is that you can do an enormous amount with low technologies used creatively, but you've got to have the numbers. You've got to have tens of thousands of drones. You've got to produce 2 and 3 million drones a year. We're talking about hundreds. So it'll be a long time before we can gear up to that. The Ukrainians at the moment, they are the best army in Europe. They're the army that have been fighting for 4 years. They are the most effective army in Europe at the moment. And technologically, they're most effective. Their problem is that there's not enough of them. It's a country of now effectively 33 million people against a country of 140 million people that is attacking them. And so their manpower problem, their frontline problem is structural. But my goodness, they are making the best of what they have got in a way that everyone else is learning from.
On a 5 to 10 year view, though, is there a slight silver lining in all of this? When we look at the UK's defence issues and everyone's estimation that we need to spend a lot more and make sure we spend it more efficiently, is that a goal that, even though past experience doesn't give us much hope, a goal that could be achievable if the next decade is buying things like drones, not needing to ramp up the numbers of people in the armed forces or to build aircraft carriers that we all know takes us far too long and always has problems with it? Is that achievable more in the next decade?
It is. Absolutely it is. I mean, the Strategic Defence Review, which came out last year, talked about increasing the lethality of a brigade. So a brigade is a basic infantry or basic army unit, 5,000 troops, whatever it's doing. Increasing their lethality, that is the threat they pose to their enemies, by tenfold. And we said, that's a bit steep, isn't it? They said, no, it's not. It can be done. I mean, the army itself was talking about increasing it by 3- and 4-fold. And in the review, after they'd done the scientific investigations, they said, we can increase it by 10-fold if we spend the money properly and if we transform. And it was a 10-year programme from 2025 to 2035. Now, we've wasted the first year by doing nothing. We're deep into wasting the second year by doing virtually nothing. So the time by which we could have all of this transformed force has now gone back to 2036, 2037, and we'll see what the world looks like by then. But yes, it's possible. It's entirely possible, but you've got to invest in it quickly now, and you've got to invest in the right things. And there's still, it's not as if the future of warfare is all drones and robotics, but the balance is changing. And what the Army's talking about, for instance, is a 40-40-20 model. And what they mean by that is 40% of the force they use will be cheap drones and robots that you don't expect to get back. So you hit the enemy with those and you never see them again. The next 40% are the valuable drones and robots that you do want to get back. So those are the really more sophisticated systems. And the last 20% is the armoured forces, the troops on the ground, the aircraft, the guts of what we used to think of as war fighting. That goes in at the end to consolidate the win that the other 40% have brought you. That's the model of a new transformed army, 40%, 40% and 20%. And the last 20% is what we used to regard as the main part of the battle plan.
Michael Zoyce, thanks so much. Great to see you. Now, preparations for Russia's annual Victory Day parade are underway, with a rehearsal taking place in Moscow today. Let's bring in Ivor, who's there for us now. What's the atmosphere?
Yeah, morning, Wilf. Morning, Sophie. I think the first thing to say that it's impossible to overstate the importance of this day for Russia. Victory Day marks the anniversary of the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. It's a really big deal here, always marked by this big military parade in Red Square. But in recent years, of course, it's taken on added significance because of Russia's war against Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin uses it now as a rallying cry for his invasion, as a means to justify it, glorifying those taking part as heroes defending the nation. So that's the context. But the atmosphere and build-up this year has been marked by extreme anxiety and nervousness over the threat posed by Ukrainian drone attacks. There has been a spike in attacks in recent weeks across Russia, mainly targeting oil refineries, energy infrastructure, but also at the start of this week, a Moscow high-rise was hit by a drone just a few miles from the Kremlin, and that has got the authorities here worried. They are nervous that their big day on Red Square could be disrupted. So as a result, they've scaled down this year's parade. There won't be any of the usual heavy machinery and military hardware that you just saw on display. None of the missile launchers, rocket launchers, armoured personnel carriers. Instead, it's just going to be troops, fearing that the hardware could be a target. And also, periodically this week, in Moscow centre, they've been switching off the mobile internet whilst these parade rehearsals have been going on. That's because drones can use the mobile networks for navigation, but it's meant the whole city centre has suddenly been plunged into an analog era, like being taken back to the 1990s all of a sudden. This enforced digital detox. It's all very strange. And none of this is the image that Vladimir Putin wants to project, of course. This parade, as you saw from those images, is all about projecting power. But the build-up and atmosphere right now has been projecting quite the opposite.
I have a really fascinating take, and look forward to your coverage over the next 24 hours or so of that parade. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to Ed Conway about his fascinating deep dive on the US's energy fortunes, the fact that they are now energy independent and how it's all linked to the Iran war.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
My darling.
Let's rig the Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.
Welcome back. Well, of course, we've been reporting for many weeks now on how difficult it's been to get any oil and gas through the Strait of Hormuz. But, of course, that means that people need to buy it from somewhere. So the world is turning to the West to try and help fill the energy gap.
A record number of oil tankers are making their way to the US coast in order to facilitate that. Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, visited the highest producing oil field in America and sent this report.
They call this place the energy capital of the world. It is a major hub for oil, gas and petrochemicals. 10 large oil refineries, more than double the total in all of Britain, a port and a deep water shipping channel that makes this one of the key gateways for all that American oil. David Brazil has spent more than 20 years monitoring the numbers on America's energy industry. He's giving me a tour of the area. But one question looms large. How much more oil can America supply to the rest of the world?
Is this whole export operation kind of running as hot as it could?
No, it is not.
Oh, really?
No.
There's more that could be pumped.
We could still pump and export more.
Exports have jumped to a record high of 6 million barrels a day in April, partly due to emergency stockpile releases. But there is still room for more.
We estimate that on the Gulf Coast we have roughly 7 million barrels a day of export capacity.
So people in Europe wondering to themselves, okay, we've got this big shortage of oil and petroleum products. Where is it going to come from? This place could be a big part of that answer.
This place could be a very big part for Europe specifically, actually.
That explains why, out on the high seas, we are witnessing a striking phenomenon. An armada of empty crude oil tankers turning west in record numbers. But extracting enough oil to help fill those tankers isn't as simple as you might think. One challenge is that whenever you get oil out of the ground, you also get gas. And strange as this will sound, in this case, that's actually a problem.
They're currently producing, somewhere in the neighborhood of 22.5 BCF a day of dry natural gas, which is more than there is capacity to get out of the Permian.
A lot of people will be killing themselves for, to have that much natural gas.
That's exactly right. And they are paying people to take it away. Last week, the price got to...
They're paying people to take it from them.
Negative $9 per MMBTU.
That is crazy.
It was wild.
Wow.
And so it's actually a cap on how much you want to produce crude because you can't do anything with the gas that's going to come out whether you like it or not.
So that's limiting their ability or willingness to pump the crude out of the ground.
Precisely.
Because there's too much gas and they don't have anywhere for that gas to go.
Yep.
So it just gets wasted. For me, from the UK, that's so frustrating. Because that presumably means we're not getting as much oil and gas as we could from America because the pipeline's not quite there yet.
Not quite there yet.
Well, our economics data editor, Ed Conway, is here with us, as you can see, and brought some extra charts that we didn't see there. Ed, the big standout point of this, of course, is that the US has more energy than it needs.
This is, I think, we've covered lots of big stories in recent weeks and months, years.
But I think this is one of the most consequential stories, not just for the UK, but for the world. Because if you think about, post-war economic policy and geopolitical policy, so much of that, the Iraq War, what happened in the Middle East in the past, what's happened in Russia, a lot of it comes back to oil. It comes back to the oil market, and it comes back to a big question of, whether the US and other countries are energy dependent or independent. So let me just show you, OK? So actually, first of all, I've got a map. I don't usually have maps here, but I've got a map, and that's just to show that this is where we travel. We went to Texas, actually West Texas, and we were looking at this kind of thing. Can you identify, Wilf or Sophie, what that is?
Well, it's oil.
It's a pump jack. We call them nodding donkeys. But here's the striking thing. So this is the Permian Basin. It's basically where a lot of the US oil is. And here's what's striking. If you look at that, so that's one of the pump jacks there. But if we just kind of zoom out and look kind of further at the scale of what we're talking about, I'm going to step back so you can see this. This is just one small area of the Permian Basin, and just look, it is completely covered, this kind of almost this circuit board of oil installations. There are, across this part of the US, there are actually across the US as a whole, you're talking about 1.8 million drilling wells. About 1 million of them are active at the moment. Compare that to, it's kind of like 14,000 McDonald's across America. So we are talking about something, the scale of which I don't think is fully appreciated. And if you look, and this is the point I was making a second ago, if you look at kind of the amount of crude oil that the US consumes, historically, so much of our story has been about the fact that the US has always been quite a big oil producer. But up until kind of around 2010, there was still a big gap in terms of its production and what it needed. And so as a result, it would have to import a lot from elsewhere. And a lot of that obviously came from the Middle East. Then fracking kind of takes hold. Mostly, it's happening around the US. It's gas, but it's also oil as well. And look at what happens to this red line after fracking kind of really begins in earnest in the Permian Basin. Just look at that.
Wow.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, and this is the key point here. That red line, US production, is now above consumption for the very first time that we've seen, really, in the post-war period. And it's happened quite recently. And if you think back to, what has happened, the events that's happening in Iran and the Persian Gulf at the moment, would Donald Trump have had the confidence to be able to go in there if he wasn't assured that, at least in statistical terms, the US was energy independent? Yes, you can kind of quibble and say there are certain things they need to import and there's certain things they're still exporting. But just in net terms, that is a massive, massive deal. And look across, compare the US with other countries around the world. So this is, again, just oil production. It's crude oil plus kind of other associated liquids. That's Saudi, that's Russia, and they, for most of history, have kind of led in terms of global production. Now look at the US and look at how things changed when shale came along, when fracking came along. And I don't think we kind of appreciate, fully have internalised around the world the significance of that. The fact that, the US was once there and now it's there, and Saudi and Russia are down there. And that is basically thanks to fracking, which is something obviously that we don't do in Europe. But there was one other thing, kind of point that kind of I allude to in that piece, and please, if you have time, do watch the film, which is that because America is trying to pump so much oil at the moment, and because a lot of gas comes out at the same time, US gas prices right now, and you've got that kind of flow, everyone's trying to get oil from America. There's not enough place for the gas to go. US gas prices right now are actually in negative territory. In negative territory. So right now, if you're a producer in the Permian Basin and you're producing oil and you produce a fair amount of gas as well, right now, you are giving people free gas. Actually, it's more than that. You're paying people to take natural gas off you. I mean, which is just bonkers. But it comes back to this fact that America has this extraordinary amount, this bounty of hydrocarbons right now, and the rest of the world does not. And so that's why, you've got this armada of vessels going across from, and you saw that a little bit about that in that piece, this armada of vessels which would previously have been going into the Gulf to get their oil. Now, very large, each of these little dots is a kind of crude tanker. Now, look where they're heading. They're heading to basically around there, to around Texas, Louisiana, to those places that we've just visited. And that's the reason why we went out there, because those charts I've shown you, but the phenomenon of fracking, which again, we don't do it here in Europe because there's big scepticism, and understandable, but there have definitely been, teething problems, but euphemistically, with fracking. But we don't do it, but we're reliant on it. And like I say, I can't think of many bigger issues right now for the world because everything comes back to energy.
I couldn't agree more. It's one of the most significant shifts of the last decade. I think the only thing I'd marginally quibble with is the extent to which people are aware of it. I mean, certainly everyone in the US is aware of it. I'd say most people across the world, certainly in the business community, are aware of it. Perhaps the issue is the middle ground, the consensus of British political discourse aware of it and aware of the enormous benefits, if you want to make those difficult environmental decisions, the enormous benefits that come economically. And on that note, the thing that's so interesting is the debate has started to change about whether we should do more in the North Sea. That's offshore, with more traditional technologies. This is fracking onshore, which would feel still a million miles away from something that people consider palatable.
It's onshore, and part of the reason I started with that kind of extraordinary picture of the satellite map of Texas is that is the surface manifestation of fracking. What fracking is, you're going underground and you're fracturing the rocks. You're getting the oil out a slightly different way to how you normally do. But if you can't imagine that plastered across the English landscape. We do have quite a lot of gas in particularly up in kind of north of England, but the decision has been taken by successive governments not to go for it. But right now, Europe is facing the consequences of that because we are energy poor and America is incredibly energy rich. And like I say, the geopolitical consequences of this, I think, are almost incalculable.
Such an eye-opener. We are out of time on this, but you're coming back because I've got a lot more questions, which is good.
By the way, that zoom-out graphic was absolutely epic. It was quite Daniel Day-Lewis. Yeah. There will be blood. I thought I need to see you dripping in oil as you come out of it, like the Oscar winner.
And everyone has to watch the film as well. It's up on our website and on YouTube.
Make sure to check it out. Email us, by the way, if you've got questions for Ed. He comes back next hour. mornings@sky.uk. We'll put your questions to him only if you've watched the full video. Otherwise, you don't get to ask a question. Now, Sky News has spent months investigating the lead-up to a mother and daughter's mystery disappearance in Gaza.
So the family is desperate for answers, and their anxiety has only grown after a harrowing photograph of the two women blindfolded in the back of a military vehicle was discovered. Sky special correspondent Alex Crawford has this exclusive report.
This is a story of one family from Gaza, their terror and terrible loss, and their fight for answers. It's a mystery about much-loved relatives who've disappeared and asks, is this policy? And how many others have vanished in Gaza? It's also the story of a single photograph. On the left of the picture is 41-year-old Huda al-Akkad. Sitting next to her is her 78-year-old mother, Aisha. The two of them are in the back of an Israeli military vehicle. There's no explanation from the Israeli military about why they're photographed like this, why they were detained, and very little detail about what happened to them afterwards. Their surviving family members are clinging to the hope that somehow their relatives are alive. They only discovered the picture recently, some 2 years after it was taken, and they urgently want answers.
By God, I demand justice. Our whole family does. We hope they're alive and we can get them out. We want a medical body, anybody, the Red Cross, anyone to stand with us, go through all the procedures and find out which prison they're in.
We want justice and someone held accountable. We want to know what happened to them. Where are they? Have they been killed by the Israelis? Are they in Israeli prison somewhere? We want to know.
We've been looking into the photograph with a team of investigative lawyers from around the world. We've pieced together the events leading up to the disappearance of the women. We've interviewed witnesses and surviving family and examined satellite images. We've compiled open-source intelligence and scrutinized the soldiers' social media posts. The Glan lawyers have been involved in several legal cases against Israel in recent years. Together, we're left with multiple worrying question marks about the women who disappeared.
This photograph, at the very least, illustrates that these two women were taken captive by the Israeli military in very degrading conditions.
As a human rights lawyer, it's one of the most worrying things that can happen when a state takes in people and makes them disappear.
When this is done systematically, it may amount to a crime against humanity.
The suffering for the Al-Akkad family is in no way lessening. Like so many thousands of others, they're crying out for answers about what happened to their relatives who just vanished in Gaza. Alex Crawford, Sky News.
Well, in response to our investigation, a spokesperson for the IDF said the individuals mentioned are not being held by the IDF and there is no indication that they were held in IDF detention facilities. The incident has been referred for review. They went on during operational activity by IDF troops. Several individuals were temporarily detained in the field. The women were released in the Gaza Strip shortly thereafter. Well, Alex joins us now. Great to have you with us as always, Alex. I guess it's a heartbreak for one family and it's also a reflection of a wider heartbreak for so many other families who just are trying to find out what has happened to their loved ones.
I mean, we focused in on the Al-Akkad family because very rarely we managed to get hold of a photograph which absolutely categorically showed that they were alive when last seen with Israeli troops. But this is replicated hundreds times over in Gaza. I mean, the Israeli human rights group Hamaked, which is based in Israel, has actually physically documented at least 800 similar cases where they have categoric evidence that they were last seen, these people have disappeared when they were last seen with Israeli troops. And these Israeli military, the Israeli authorities, the Israeli soldiers who we approached directly, as well as their commanders, have repeatedly refused to answer any of the questions about what happened after they left, if they did leave, Israeli detention. And that rebuttal by the Israeli authorities just doesn't come anywhere near. There is, under the rules of law, the detaining soldiers have a requirement under the Geneva Convention to log why they detain people, who they detain, where, if they drop them off, safely or not, they need to say where they drop them off and they need to be out of the combat zone. We know that area through our investigations was absolutely alive with military action. At that same street, they'd had several airstrikes. There were snipers operating in that street. So the idea that the soldiers drove them out of that area in the middle of this very hectic military activity seems implausible, but we have reached out repeatedly to Israeli authorities to answer those questions, and also a number of lawyers have, and a number of different human rights groups, and they haven't come up with the answers. And according to the Gaza Ministry of Health, the Amnesty International, ICRC, there are hundreds, possibly thousands of people in a similar position. And remember, ICRC has not had access to any of the Israeli detention centres or the Israeli prison facilities since the 7th of October 2023. So it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to trace where people have gone to. And people do not just disappear. Something has happened to them.
Striking numbers as well of potentially how many we're talking about. Whilst we've got you, just interested to get your take on the latest in Lebanon, Beirut in particular, and, you know, I guess in light of the fact that President Trump might be making more positive noises about peace talks with Iran on the same day that we see Israel strike Lebanon again. I guess the prospects in your eyes of that calming down, even if President Trump would like it to.
Lebanon is right in the middle of it all, and unfortunately has been made to be key to any successful resolution of what's going on between US, Israel, Iran, because of Hezbollah and Iran deciding that Hezbollah has got to be part of any future peace deal. And if yesterday we saw for the first time since the so-called ceasefire, which is a ceasefire in name only, because every single day there has been attacks by the Israeli military in the south of Lebanon primarily, but yesterday, once again, in the capital, that doesn't bode well for the future. We know that the number of paramedics, health workers, civilians, women and children who are being hit in these Israeli attacks is climbing almost by the day. There's more than 100 medics who've been killed in Israeli attacks in Lebanon, and that is a shocking number. And the Lebanese authorities are repeatedly saying that this needs to stop. They're repeatedly calling, whilst trying to negotiate with Israel, and they're very heavily criticised for these direct talks with Israel amongst the Lebanese population, and particularly Hezbollah, who feel that, and unfortunately a lot of people who perhaps were critical of Hezbollah in Lebanon are now caught. There's a danger that they're going to swing towards Hezbollah because, strangely enough, they don't like foreign troops taking over large swathes of their country. And a fifth of the population in Lebanon is now out of their homes and displaced. You know, more than 1 million people in a relatively small populated country. And just last week, we did an investigation on the amount of destruction in South Lebanon with, hundreds, I think it was several thousand housing units being destroyed, civilian infrastructure being destroyed. And that's not just our own investigation, that's investigations by a number of different outlets who are seeing this dramatic decimation of all civilian life particularly in the south of Lebanon.
Alex, thank you so much. It's always so good to have you on the programme. Thank you.
Now, as the US and China build up their AI dominance, Europe and Britain are being urged to maintain sovereignty when it comes to the technology. We're joined now by the CEO of Jitterbit and former advisor to the US National Cybersecurity Partnership, Bill Connor. A very good morning to you, Bill. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Wilfred.
How far behind the US and China is Europe and the UK at the moment on this?
Well, it depends on which dimension, right? If you look at infrastructure, they're certainly trying to catch up, but a long way to go. Your previous segment on energy, you got to have a lot of energy to power these next generation data centers. If you look at the large language models, that ship is gone, right? And so I think it's further behind in the core infrastructure of that, but that's not the only race. The race is going to be how do you apply it, how do you use it, whether it's on the government side in the battlefields like being done today, or in the boardrooms of how you transform the business.
Are you optimistic that the UK can succeed in that area?
Yeah, I actually am. Having worked a long time in the UK in security and encryption, that's why I'm in the AI piece as well. Britain is very good at focusing on global business. So it's not a one country fits all. It's how can one country and one business differentiate its whole business, incorporating AI from delivery to development to service to sales. And, the balance that the UK usually gets between data sovereignty, regulations like GDPR and others, UK's played that down the middle globally very well in the past.
Are we set, based on that early lead that the US-based large language model owners have, are we set to just always license the best AI software from abroad, or could we and should we still try and develop ourselves? It's
a really important question, Wilfred. I think there's pieces you got to have. With data sovereignty, you're going to need infrastructure. So you're going to have the power in the data centers. I firmly believe you don't have to own the LLMs. That's generative AI. It's important, but, ChatGPT was the fastest technology ever introduced. Well, a few months ago, OpenClaw, agentic AI, entered. And that made ChatGPT look slow. And I think agentic AI is where the businesses and governments are really going to have to take advantage, because that's where the transformation is. So, LLMs just are kind of like prompted, give you a big answer, ask the universe, so to speak. Agentic AI actually takes action and does something. And that's where the real power of AI comes from. And in that case, Jitterbit is about AI accountability and trying to be agnostic to the LLMs.
Now, we're not completely agnostic because with DeepSeek, they all have training and models and souls, so to speak. So we're trying to be agnostic to it and take advantage of it, be aware of the data sovereignty of the different, divisions in your countries and companies, but really get to the power, which is the agentic AI that actually does stuff for you.
And just finally, coming back to the energy point, I mean, can we still have the type of optimistic outlook you have with energy costs where they are, or are you optimistic because you think that we'll do something to address those energy costs?
Well, I think everyone has to globally right now. And being from Texas, I was fascinated with the most recent play. I didn't know I needed to come to London to hear about that. But, if you look in the States, I mean, Texas has been very forward on fracking, yes, but offshore. California has about 60% of its oil imported because it doesn't allow fracking, it doesn't allow offshoring. So all of a sudden, even within the U.S., you think it's ubiquitous, it's not. And so I think there will need to be some different political thoughts and regulations. And I do think the UK, I mean, you've said it, wonderful offshoring opportunities here. Fracking, maybe not so much, but you've got other alternatives like nuclear as well, that, with the next generation nuclear, it's a longer lead time, but you're going to have to address that.
Bill Connor, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
CEO of Jitterbit.
Now, it's polling day, which means we can't say very much about politics at all because of the broadcasting rules. So instead, we are going to bring you delightful pictures of dogs going to the polling station. One of my favourite polling day traditions, I have to say. So this is the first one. This is Bexley. Joby sent us this one. Some gorgeous two dogs there, looking very happy as they wait outside the polling booth. Here's Ziggy. This is Ziggy in Haringey, again looking very, very cute. And plus, just because we really love a dog picture here on Mornings, our director, we've got another one here, another one very cute, not sure who that's sent from, but thanks anyway. But we've got to send, our director, Dave Gilman, sent us this final one of Winnie in Kent. No voting there.
There's no voting in Kent, so just on his rather lovely purple sofa.
Now, anyone who knows Dave Gilman...
is unsurprised by the loud colours of the sofa.
Dave loves a colourful shirt, and so me and Wilf are very happy that it's reflected in the soft furnishings in his house as well.
Yeah, he loves a loud coloured, flowery shirt, so literally that sofa captures it all.
Yeah, there you go. Send us your pictures. We would love to bring you some more mornings at sky.uk, a little ray of sunshine for us all as everyone goes out to vote. Lots more coverage coming up, of course, in just a few moments' time.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Morning, it is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Will, a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
A British expedition guide who was on the cruise ship hit with Hantavirus speaks to Sky News and reveals he's isolating in hospital after falling ill.
Donald Trump says the war in Iran will be over quickly as he looks to pressure Tehran into agreeing a deal.
Beirut is hit by Israel for the first time since the ceasefire.
After a war of words over Iran, the US Secretary of State arrives in Rome to repair relations between the President and Pope Leo.
We'll also hear from the former England rugby captain Lewis Moody about his fight against motor neuron disease and how the diagnosis has affected him.
Yeah, we all think we'll reach a certain place or things we'll see and be involved in. So, you know, the things that you will miss.
A very good morning to you. Well, a British hantavirus patient has told Sky News he is isolating in hospital after being evacuated from the cruise ship at the centre of the outbreak.
Martin Anstey is an expedition guide who was on board the MV Hondius, and he spoke to us from his hospital bed in the Netherlands. 2 other British people are now self-isolating in the UK for up to 8 weeks. They're not, though, currently showing any symptoms.
Emma's here with us to tell us a bit more about this, including an update in the last hour or so from the Spanish Health Ministry.
Yeah, so 3 people were evacuated from the ship yesterday. So one of them was Martin, then also one of his Dutch colleagues, 41-year-old, and a German passenger who was 69. 2 of them made it initially to the Netherlands. One of them was diverted to the Canaries. So this is an update in relation to that from the Spanish Health Ministry. The person with symptoms who was on the plane in Gran Canaria since yesterday has finally been transferred to Amsterdam on a new medical plane, different from the one that was initially in Gran Canaria. At all times, the operation is being carried out following the established health and safety protocols in coordination with the competent authorities and the company responsible for the transfer. So, Martin Anstey, 56 years old, a retired police officer. There had been reports that he was actually the ship's doctor. In fact, he's an expedition guide. He spoke to one of our colleagues last night on the phone, said he was doing OK, saying lots of tests are being done, and he expects doctors to have a clearer picture later this week. He started off with mild symptoms, according to his wife, then became more serious and is now stable and relieved to be off the ship. That was Nicola speaking to The Telegraph. And he's very much in isolation as he's being treated. So all of this has been linked, allegedly, according to anonymous officials in Argentina, to a bird-watching trip on a landfill site in Argentina. So this is at the start of the cruise, at the beginning of April. Allegedly, a couple went bird-watching. Now, landfill site, rodents, we know that hantavirus is spread by contaminated droppings, so airborne that you inhale. This is a real respiratory illness. And the Andes strain is actually very rare to pass between humans, but you have to have very close contact. And, of course, these are people sharing a cabin. We know that 3 people have died, one of them a German passenger, but also Dutch couple, both 69 years old. 5 people are unwell, one of them, Martin. There's also another British person being treated in Johannesburg. And the UK Health Security Agency also confirming that 2 British people had already flown home earlier independently. They're actually showing no symptoms, but they are isolating just in case, as are their close contacts. And as for the ship, it left Cape Verde yesterday. That's on the west coast of Africa, heading north to the Canaries, expected to dock in a few days' time, sometime over the weekend. Around 150 people on board. No one's showing any symptoms at the moment. They'll be taking no chances, though, making sure that no one is carrying the virus before people are then sent onwards back to their homes. But the overall message is that there's actually a very low risk to the public. We're not dealing with something like COVID, but obviously for those caught up in it, very, very worrying time.
Emma, Christoph, thanks so much. Emma Birchley there for us. Now, the polls are open, of course, in what is the biggest set of elections since the general election in 2024. Millions of people will be casting their ballots today.
We, of course, have got national elections to the parliaments in Scotland and Wales. In England, there's 5,000 seats up for grabs on 136 local councils, so an awful lot of people voting today. Polls open for about 2 hours. They'll shut at 10 p.m. tonight, and we're going to have full coverage kicking off after that. So from midnight tonight, Jonathan Samuels is going to be here to take you through some of those early results as they come in. We're expecting maybe like a quarter or so of council results to declare overnight. Tomorrow from midday, I'm going to be in this hot seat for a 7-hour special, 12 till 7, as the bulk of the results come in, the councils, Scotland, Wales, so definitely stick with us for that one. It's going to be really interesting.
Going to be a fascinating set of results as they do come in. Now, the US and Iran could be closing in on a deal as President Trump says the war will be over quickly. He made the prediction as an American fighter jet shot an Iranian oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman. Meanwhile, Israel has struck Beirut for the first time since a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah was announced last month. And this morning, the Israeli military said that Hezbollah has launched rockets towards the IDF in South Lebanon over the past few hours. Here's President Trump.
We're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon. We're not going to let that happen. And we won't let that happen. And so we're dealing with people that want to make a deal very much, and we'll see whether or not they can make a deal that's satisfactory to us. We have it very much under control. The blockade is unbelievable. The Navy's been incredible. The job they did, it's like a wall of steel. Nobody goes through. In particular, the Iranians, they're not getting anything through one way or the other, so they're out of business. And we'll see whether or not they are agreeing. And if they don't agree, they'll end up agreeing shortly thereafter. So that's the way it is.
Well, Sally Lockwood is in Dubai for us. Adam Parsons in Jerusalem. Adam, Beirut hit overnight. Where does this leave the ceasefire?
Well, I think the ceasefire, it depends where you are in Lebanon. If you're in the south of Lebanon, it doesn't feel like there's a ceasefire at all. In fact, it feels like there's a Israeli military occupation of a great swathe of southern Lebanon, and actually there has been constant activity there with Israeli military attacking what they consider to be Hezbollah infrastructure, which they did again and have blown up, I think they said, about 15 pieces of infrastructure, and Hezbollah firing rockets back at Israeli soldiers and also towards northern Israel. So an Israeli soldier was seriously wounded yesterday, and the IDF say more rockets have been fired at them by Hezbollah. So that ceasefire, certainly there has been a huge reduction in the total number of attacks by Israel on Lebanon. But in the south of Lebanon, we were up on the border just a few days ago, and you can see huge plumes of smoke, machine gun fire, you can hear shells going off. We saw Israeli tanks returning from Lebanon. So it doesn't look or sound or feel like a ceasefire is in place there. What happened that is different is that the Israelis have now launched an airstrike on Beirut, the first time that they've attacked the Lebanese capital for a month. It was, they said, a specific target against the commander of the Radwan force, which is the part of Hezbollah that is what they consider their elite combat unit, and the force that is said to be responsible for these attacks and combat operations aimed at northern Israel and aimed at Israeli troops. Now, you might say, why now? After weeks of not attacking Beirut, why now? Well, Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister put out a statement saying that this was merely a case of proving that Israel's enemies would be caught wherever they are. But I think probably you have to put this in a position where at the same time that Israel is doing this, it knows the United States is doing or preparing to do some kind of deal with Iran. We've seen the Pakistan Foreign Ministry saying today that it would be honoured to host the signing of that deal. And there are plenty in Israel who think that to put it bluntly, America is letting Iran off lightly, that particularly up in the north of Israel. I think that the war should be harder, it should be more protracted, that Iran should take more punishment, that its nuclear arsenal hasn't been depleted enough, that its ballistic missiles can be allowed to regroup, and that it's still going to fund Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and militia groups in Iraq, and so on. And I think that is probably a feeling that you would get if you were inside Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet meeting, is frustration. Israel would like to continue the war. It will not accept, so I have been told, the status quo in Lebanon. It wants to go after Hezbollah. And so it is nervous about a peace deal that thwarts those expectations. Now, of course, the other side of that is that the Americans may well feel that if they take nuclear material back to America, that the economic damage that they have done, the death of the previous Ayatollah Khamenei, and promises potentially to rein in both ballistic missiles and support for groups like Hezbollah may be sufficient. I think the Israelis will take some convincing that that is enough. And, of course, we don't know if a peace deal is going to be achieved. At the moment, it is mooted. It is talked about as a one-page memorandum that leads into some sort of longer-term negotiation. Again, there will be many who think that sounds like a pretty woolly sort of deal, but it's what's on the table. And it is against that backdrop that you have to look at the fact that Israel has once again decided to flex its muscles and attack Beirut. And worse so, by the way, 2,500 people have been killed in Lebanon by Israeli military activity over the past couple of months. More than 1 million people have been displaced.
Adam, great stuff. Let's bring in Sally. Sally, how have the latest comments coming out of the White House gone down across the wider region as towards the prospects of that elusive peace deal?
I mean, the fact that diplomacy is now being talked about once again is certainly very welcome news indeed. But I think there's a large amount of scepticism here about just how close they are to a breakthrough, because it really does feel like we've been here many times before, especially with Donald Trump really talking up the prospects of some sort of imminent breakthrough. Now, we know that Donald Trump is prone to exaggeration, and we've seen that he's made several attempts to try and end this war and find an off-ramp before, and they just haven't worked. The US naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has been in place for more than 3 weeks now. That hasn't worked, and Project Freedom didn't work either. That was paused after just 2 days. But I think there is certainly renewed hope now that the talk is focusing on some sort of diplomatic effort. And, you know, reports from the US suggest that the Iranians are now considering this one-page memorandum of understanding that the US has put to them, which is essentially a rough framework of how another round of peace talks would go. And the understanding is that the blockades on the Strait of Hormuz would be lifted over a 30-day period while they talked through the much more complex issues of Iran's nuclear program, sanctions relief, amongst other things. Now, there was one encouraging sign yesterday from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Naval X account. They posted to suggest that they would be allowing maritime traffic to resume through the Strait of Hormuz before long. But then shortly after that, there was an update from US Central Command to say that an American fighter jet had shot out the rudder of an Iranian tanker because it failed to comply with their orders to not sail through the Strait of Hormuz. That won't have gone down well with the Iranians, and it's a reminder of just how tense and volatile the situation is in the Strait of Hormuz. One brighter note is that the UAE wasn't attacked yesterday, unlike on Monday and Tuesday, when missiles and drones were fired at the UAE, once again in clear violations of the ceasefire. Many feared that the ceasefire was going to fall apart altogether, that the US would retaliate. That didn't happen. In fact, America played those attacks down. And interestingly, our partners NBC are reporting that the Saudis were absolutely furious about Project Freedom, that Gulf allies hadn't been informed of this new operation by the US to try and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And the Saudis, in fact, refused to allow any operations linked to Project Freedom to be carried out from their air bases and airspace, which suggests that perhaps relations are becoming strained between certain Gulf states and the US, who are simply running out of patience when it comes to this situation, not just because of the security implications when it comes to their countries, but also the huge economic impact that it's having on them as well. But certainly, reports from the US say that they are hoping for some sort of response from the Iranians in the next 48 hours when it comes to this latest proposal. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. Certainly, Donald Trump will not want this war and this unresolved situation hanging over him when he visits China next week. But everything he's tried so far just simply hasn't worked. It is clear, though, Donald Trump wants to find some sort of off-ramp and strike some sort of deal. It's just not clear on what terms that will be. Both sides still very far apart in terms of their demands. Meanwhile, for this region, we remain in some sort of tense holding pattern, waiting to see what comes next.
Sally, great stuff. Thanks so much. Thanks again to Adam as well. Now, as the flow of oil and gas through the Strait of Hormuz remains largely restricted, the world is turning west to help fill the energy gap.
There is a record number of oil tankers currently making their way to the US coast. And this is really at the heart of so many issues when it comes to the war, when it comes to geopolitics. Economics and data editor Ed Conway joins us now, who you say you've gone to, what is it, the highest producing oil field in, what?
We went to Texas. So the Permian Basin is the heart of US kind of oil country. And shall I show you? Because there's this really staggering... We went out there just recently. So obviously there's Texas. Historically, you know, this is historically a big oil producing part of the US. Everyone remembers Dallas, if you're old enough at least. And we went to an area called Midland, Texas. And the key thing about this area, OK, so this is the heart of the US fracking industry. It is fracking for oil. And what is fracking? It's hydraulic fracturing. You're kind of sending down sand and water underground, hydraulically fracturing the rocks. Very controversial on this side of the Atlantic. It's basically banned in most of Europe. But in the US, the scale of it is kind of, you know, beyond belief. And when I say the scale of it, I mean, just this is a pump jack. We call them kind of nodding donkeys in the UK. And I've just focused on a satellite image on a pump jack in the middle of kind of close to Midland, Texas, which is the Permian Basin. And if we just zoom out, you will see how many of them we're talking about in this area. And then zoom out further, and you see that across the Permian Basin, you're talking about the number of oil wells that almost beggars belief. Across the US, there's kind of about 14,000 McDonald's, similar number of Starbucks. There's 1.8 million oil wells in the US, if you can believe that. Just kind of get your head around the scale of what we're talking about when we're talking about this energy revolution in the US. And when you're thinking about the consequences of it, well, it is enormously consequential. And this chart goes back to the 1980s, and it shows you just how much oil and different kind of oil products America needs. So this is the consumption in America of these different products. And the key point here, OK, is that domestic production of oil, there was always a big gap between domestic production and what it needed. And that gap historically had to be filled with imports. And a lot of those imports came from the Middle East. And if you think back to, you know, history, think back to the 1970s, the oil crises, the fact that the US was vulnerable to what was going on in Iran and elsewhere in Saudi Arabia. Then fracking took hold in the Permian. I mean, this is an old technology, actually, that goes back quite a long time. But really, it wasn't until kind of, you know, 2008, 2010s that it really started to take off. It was first gas and then oil. And then look at what happened to US oil production in the following years. Look at that red line. It is absolutely staggering. And I think, you know, while it's appreciated that that line has been, you know, going up in recent years, and, you know, Wolf, you mentioned this earlier, you know, that's understood. I think what's less appreciated is literally in the past few months, that red line has overtaken the kind of dark blue line, meaning the US, statistically, it still has to import certain types of crude just because its refineries prefer a certain type. Let's not go into the full details of that. But statistically, at least, for the first time in decades and decades and decades, really the first time in earnest, going back to kind of World War II, the US is statistically energy independent. And when you think about what's happened, you know, in recent months, would Donald Trump have had the confidence to go into the Persian Gulf, this area that most presidents in the past, whether it's, you know, George W. Bush, they've always kind of trod relatively carefully, notwithstanding what happened in Iraq. This time around, the US is in a stronger position than it's ever been before to intervene. And so that's quite striking. Another way of kind of looking at the same numbers, so this is showing you production in other countries. And again, most people still associate Saudi Arabia as being this kind of, you know, the central bank of global oil. It is the biggest producer of world oil. Russia actually is not far behind throughout history. And the US was historically almost always below those two. But fracking, again, has completely changed the game. And now America is leagues above. It's almost kind of double the production of Saudi Arabia. And that shift is recent. It's recent. It's the last 10 years. And it's really only just recently that the US has kind of got to kind of double the size of Saudi. And so I think we kind of understate the significance of these shifts. They're quite geopolitical shifts when we're talking about, you know, what are kind of, you know, domestic stories. There's domestic stories about what's going on with fuel prices, with kerosene prices, with gilt yields, is kind of the big picture that overshadows everything. And I think, you know, that's the background to geopolitics, not just, you know, right now, but I think in future decades.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's almost like a whole new lens through which to look through the current situation. Ed, I've got a question for you, because we're always told that actually domestic production doesn't make any difference because prices are set on the international markets. But I guess it's a bit more of a complex picture than that.
Well, it is complex, and there's kind of two elements to it, which, I mean, like, you know, the US, although it has this plenty in terms of the amount of oil it has, still, you know, gasoline prices in America are, you know, as you know, if you follow these things, they're up above kind of $4 a barrel nationwide. It depends on where you're looking. And that's enormously politically sensitive. And so, you know, these are internationally traded markets. The price affects America. But price isn't everything, and ultimately, you always, every so often, you have these moments where you have the simple question that we're wrestling with now in Europe, which is, if you need the energy, will it come at any price? And I think that's the thing. America, you know, has domestically all of the energy it needs. That, you know, obviously, right now, it still sends a lot of oil elsewhere to be refined. A lot of oil comes to the UK, and we are dependent on American oil and American natural gas. But America has kind of changed the game. And the reason why, you know, these charts, you know, in particular that one, to me is so significant is because, and I could have run it back even further than this, is that, you know, from Jimmy Carter, even beforehand, you know, Reagan, all of these presidents were all banging on about energy independence and energy security for the US. And now, finally, they've done it. And they've done it literally in the last year. And it wasn't just Donald Trump, you know, because that goes back to kind of, you know, Obama and Biden and other presidents as well. And a lot of these measures, you know, were incentivised by George W. Bush and previous George Bush. So this is momentous. And like I say, it's very hard to kind of map through what this means for China, for geopolitics. But that's the chart that matters, I think.
By the way, in terms of the things, net energy independent, in terms of some of the finite things they're short of, and you rightly say, you know, this obviously allows them a bit more of a mentality to go into Iran. Venezuela, and not taking the oil but controlling the supply chain, allowed them even more flexibility to go into Iran in terms of what they were short of there. Yeah,
so American refineries like heavy, gloopy crude. So crude oil coming out of the ground. The stuff that's coming out, I know you're interested in this, you guys. The stuff that comes out of these particular pump jacks, that is it's quite a light, kind of liquidy crude. And actually, American refineries are set up. I'm going to do a little zoom behind me so you can see that going on. American refineries actually set up for heavy kind of crude that you get in Venezuela. And so they still kind of, you know, need to take that stuff from Venezuela and send their stuff that's coming out of the Permian elsewhere, including to the UK and to Europe. But they're now theoretically in a position, where they could raise the kind of barriers and the borders. And I think that is the ultimate semi-economically apocalyptic thing that people do sometimes worry about, you know, in their dark nights here in Europe and in Asia as well. What if America said, OK, we're going to stop exporting? Because actually, up until, I think, 2015 or so, they weren't really exporting oil. There was a rule saying we're not exporting oil, we're not exporting natural gas. Now they are. And without that natural gas, we wouldn't be able to heat our homes the next few winters.
What portion of our natural gas comes from the US, roughly?
Oh, gosh. I mean, so most of it still comes from Norway and from the North Sea, but there's this chunk of kind of liquefied natural gas which gets shipped in, which is kind of, 10 to 20%, depending on the year, but it's going to get bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. And most of that comes from America right now. And then the Qatari stuff that we hoped we were getting, we're not going to get anymore because we can't, well, at least right now, you can't get through the Strait of Hormuz. So America's importance and our dependence on them is one of the biggest issues we're going to have to wrestle with as a continent in Europe for years and years. And I don't think we've kind of faced up to that. And that's before you get to this other, I think, legitimate conversation we need to have about, OK, how do we try to get energy security in Europe? Are we happy to have a landscape that's covered with all of these wells, which is, one way at least of fracking? That's how America has managed to get the stuff out of the ground at a reasonable cost. Are we happy to do that in Europe, or are we not? These are issues, I think, they're going to come up again in the coming years.
Fantastic stuff, as always. Ed's full film, you can scan that QR code on the screen right now to watch the new oil order, and well worth doing so.
Well, Ed, talking there about the sort of changing situation and economic situation in America having such a huge impact on geopolitics, we're going to talk about the pure political situation in America, because the US Secretary of State is in Rome to try and repair relations after Donald Trump's attacks over Pope Leo's stance in Iran. That's coming up after the break.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out!
What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming. It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has arrived in Rome for talks with Pope Leo today, aiming to repair relations between the Vatican and President Trump.
So, yeah, as Wilf was saying, it's all about trying to build bridges after a war of words over Iran between the President and the Pope. Well, our Europe correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, is in Vatican City and joins us now. So, yeah, Marco Rubio's got his work cut out then.
Yeah, he does. I mean, of all the people to pick a fight with in the world, Donald Trump has chosen the Pope, making a number of different comments that have been critical of the pontiff, including suggesting that the Pope, of course, is American-born, born in Chicago, was effectively supporting Iran and Iran's desire to have a nuclear weapon, also suggesting that the Pope was putting Catholics around the world in danger. And the Pope has hit back, really. I mean, he hasn't actually specifically named Donald Trump, but he has said that he is just practicing and teaching the teachings of the Bible, which, of course, call for peace around the world. And so Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, himself a practicing Catholic, is here today. He's here for a couple of days. Today is to meet the Pope and senior Vatican officials. Tomorrow he'll be meeting the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who is actually taking the Pope's side on this. And early this week, so just really before Rubio took off from Washington to Rome, Trump had another pop at the Pope. So it's not going to be an easy task for Marco Rubio, although he has generally kept his counsel in this war of words between the two men. And of course, there is a sort of a political, quite an interesting political dynamic to it, because not only is Marco Rubio a practicing Catholic, but so too is the US Vice President, J.D. Vance, who has also had his own dig at Pope Leo, saying that he should be careful, the pontiff should be careful when talking about theology. And so it will do Marco Rubio no harm, given that both he and J.D. Vance have made no secret about their desire to be the next US president. It will do him no harm to be seen both by the Vatican, but also millions of practicing American Christians as being in the good books with the Vatican. So, that's his task here today, to try and smooth the waters.
It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be really interesting to see how he does and the extent to which he really is the top diplomat or not. Ali Bunkle there for us. Glorious backdrop there outside the Vatican. And front drop. Ali looks just as lovely. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the rise of anti-Semitism in the UK with Lord Finkelstein. Welcome back. Let's talk about the rise in anti-Semitic attacks across the country. And police data shows the number of incidents reached a record high of 140 just last month. Conservative peer and Times columnist Lord Finkelstein joins us now. Great to see you again, Lord Finkelstein. And your latest op-ed on this piece, I think, is really interesting because you make a very clear point that anti-Semitism of the kind that we've seen lately in these attacks isn't just a problem for those being marginalised and attacked. It's a problem for the entire country.
Yes, and this sort of thought first came to me when I came under an attack from a group of American anti-Semites led by a man called Nick Fuentes, who said Hitler was cool. He was a young guy. And I tried saying to some of these people, I know that you think this is all about me and being Jewish and, you know, being the son of a Holocaust survivor and, you know, you just want to sort of take the mickey out of that and have a bit of fun. But this is a disaster ultimately, and not just for me, but also for you. And if you look at the history of countries that have gone down this road, everybody suffers, not just the Jewish community, which obviously suffers worse and suffers first, but then everybody else too. And ultimately, you know, even in Hitler's case, and I started my article in the Times with this case, you know, in Hitler's case, they ended up in the bunker with Goebbels killing all of his children, getting himself shot, and not even having enough petrol left to be able to burn his body. In other words, it had brought even onto the perpetrators total calamity. So my piece was just about a broader point. I know that everybody, and there's, you know, in addition, I should say this, because in addition to all of the difficult stuff, there's also been a lot of love from lots of people. I'm sure lots of your viewers are among those people who've shared that for Jewish people, and we really appreciate that. But there is this broader national mood that I am a bit worried about, and I wanted to warn where it could lead.
I guess the follow-up to that is, how worried are you about it relative to that, you know, worst of all possible imaginable scenarios that you're comparing to late 1930s? I mean, hopefully, presumably, you think we're still an awful long way from that.
Yeah, I think we're away from it. So when my grandfather came back from the First World War in 1919, he wrote one of the first pamphlets warning about the possibility of anti-Semitic pogroms and a disaster overwhelming Jews. And when you read that, you can see lots of the things that he writes in that pamphlet. There are signs of that. At the same time, you can see that it's got far more advanced, even in 1919. So, you know, what the Nazis take over in 1933, but even in 1919, when he's writing, it's still a long way away from where we are. But I think while my parents would both have wished me to show a sense of proportion, that was who they were as people, about what they had suffered and about where we are, and to keep calm, I think it would be foolish for us not to learn the lessons of that history. And certainly certain things in that passage between 1918 and the war and the Second World War begin to worry me. So the idea that things can't get any worse, that you may as well turn to extremist parties because, you know, we may as well just take a risk, a gamble. And by the way, this mood overwhelmed Britain in the 1970s as well. So this isn't the only time, but it's a bit of a worrying mood. If it turned, because this was another aspect of the rise of Hitler, to violence, where people felt themselves so self-righteous that they thought they could fight each other on the streets. And you could see that what's happened in the Jewish community over the last couple of years as people sort of taking their tweets and beginning to express them with petrol bombs and knives. So that kind of febrile political atmosphere, look, it's just possible that it could do that kind of harm to us. And I think, yes, of course, we're at an early stage of that. My parents always taught me not to see everything as Hitler, but they also, their story also says it's also not true that nothing's Hitler.
Let's see if there's a positive side. I mean, I don't know what your answer is going to be, but in the last week or so, have you seen a change in direction of travel, a greater urgency to respond?
So I think about 2 months ago, I greeted a group in the House of Lords of victims of anti-Semitism of various kinds. And one of the things that they all reported was how difficult the authorities found it to understand that it was really happening, to recognise that it was a real thing. Partly because it is confused in a lot of people's minds with, legitimate and disagreement with the policy of the State of Israel. So they sometimes weren't able to distinguish where the line was, and this was a real problem. I think now it will be much more obvious to people that the things like what happened in Golders Green, that's not explicable solely by people trying to express an educated opinion on what's happened in Gaza. And so there does begin to be recognition this is something that is real, it's not in Jewish people's heads, it exists and it's happening. And that is an advance, definitely. And I would say the other advance is that the leadership of the country, ranging from Shabana Mahmoud, the Home Secretary, to Kemi Badenoch, they have, and Mark Rowley as an example, they have shown an appreciation and a certain moral clarity of the problem and a certain moral clarity. And so those are all positives.
Lord Finkelstein, it's a pleasure to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Now, preparations for Russia's annual Victory Day parade are underway, with a rehearsal taking place in Moscow today.
Our correspondent, Ivor Bennett, is in Moscow with the latest for us.
That it's impossible to overstate the importance of this day for Russia. Victory Day marks the anniversary of the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. It's a really big deal here, always marked by this big military parade in Red Square. But in recent years, of course, it's taken on added significance because of Russia's war against Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin uses it now as a rallying cry for his invasion, as a means to justify it, glorifying those taking part as heroes defending the nation. So that's the context. But the atmosphere and build-up this year has been marked by extreme anxiety and nervousness over the threat posed by Ukrainian drone attacks. There has been a spike in attacks in recent weeks across Russia, mainly targeting oil refineries, energy infrastructure, but also at the start of this week, a Moscow high-rise was hit by a drone just a few miles from the Kremlin, and that has got the authorities here worried. They are nervous that their big day on Red Square could be disrupted. So as a result, they've scaled down this year's parade. There won't be any of the usual heavy machinery and military hardware that you just saw on display. None of the missile launchers, rocket launchers, armoured personnel carriers. Instead, it's just going to be troops, fearing that the hardware could be a target. And also, periodically this week, in Moscow centre, they've been switching off the mobile internet whilst these parade rehearsals have been going on. That's because drones can use the mobile networks for navigation, but it's meant the whole city centre has suddenly been plunged into an analogue era, like being taken back to the 1990s all of a sudden. This enforced digital detox. It's all very strange. And none of this is the image that Vladimir Putin wants to project, of course. This parade, as you saw from those images, is all about projecting power. But the build-up and atmosphere right now has been projecting quite the opposite.
Ivor Bennett reporting for us there. Now, Sky News has spent months investigating the lead-up to a mother and daughter's mysterious disappearance in Gaza.
Their family's desperate for answers, and their anxiety has only grown after a harrowing photograph of the two women blindfolded in the back of a military vehicle was discovered. Sky special correspondent Alex Crawford has this exclusive report.
This is a story of one family from Gaza, their terror and terrible loss, and their fight for answers. It's a mystery about much-loved relatives who've disappeared and asks, is this policy? And how many others have vanished in Gaza? It's also the story of a single photograph. On the left of the picture is 41-year-old Huda Al-Akkad. Sitting next to her is her 78-year-old mother, Aisha. The two of them are in the back of an Israeli military vehicle. There's no explanation from the Israeli military about why they're photographed like this, why they were detained, and very little detail about what happened to them afterwards. Their surviving family members are clinging to the hope that somehow their relatives are alive. They only discovered the picture recently, some 2 years after it was taken, and they urgently want answers.
By God, I demand justice. Our whole family does. We hope they're alive and we can get them out. We want a medical body, anybody, the Red Cross, anyone to stand with us, go through all the procedures and find out which prison they're in.
We want justice and someone held accountable. We want to know what happened to them. Where are they? Have they been killed by the Israelis? Are they in Israeli prison somewhere? We want to know.
We've been looking into the photograph with a team of investigative lawyers from around the world. We've pieced together the events leading up to the disappearance of the women. We've interviewed witnesses and surviving family and examined satellite images. We've compiled open-source intelligence and scrutinised the soldiers' social media posts. The Glan lawyers have been involved in several legal cases against Israel in recent years. Together, we're left with multiple worrying question marks about the women who disappeared.
This photograph, at the very least, illustrates that these two women were taken captive by the Israeli military in very degrading conditions.
As a human rights lawyer, it's one of the most worrying things that can happen when a state takes in people and makes them disappear.
When this is done systematically, it may amount to a crime against humanity.
The suffering for the Al-Akkad family is in no way lessening. Like so many thousands of others, they're crying out for answers about what happened to their relatives who just vanished in Gaza. Alex Crawford, Sky News.
Now, in response to our investigation, a spokesperson for the IDF said the individuals mentioned are not being held by the IDF and there is no indication that they were held in IDF detention facilities. The incident has been referred for review. They went on during operational activity by IDF troops. Several individuals were temporarily detained in the field. The women were released in the Gaza Strip shortly thereafter.
Time now for a look at the weather.
I hope we haven't forgotten anything.
Travel insurance, I tick that box.
Yeah, but remember what you forgot last year.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
The next couple of days look cool, quite cloudy and mainly dry, but there'll be a risk of showers for many, some of which might be heavy. England and Wales will be mostly dry with sunny spells this morning, although the southeast and the west may just catch the odd light shower. Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland, meanwhile, will see showers developing widely, while some more general showery rain will move into the increasingly windy northwest by lunchtime. It'll be cool again after a local frost, but it should be a touch warmer than yesterday.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
After the break, we'll be talking about pressures on domestic food supply in light of the Iran war.
A lot of local and national seats are up for grabs.
Waiting for the people's vote on who will sit in them. It's your chance to have a say
on who has a seat at the table.
Follow Sky News as we give you the best seats in the House.
From voting
to the results,
the analysis
and what comes next.
Join us for Vote 26.
Get the full story fast on Sky News.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Welcome back. Campaigners are calling on farmers to ban the use of weed killer sprayed on food crops just before they're harvested. MPs and industry bodies have been raising concerns about the possible effects of the substance, which has been classified as probably, carcinogenic.
Well, let's speak now to the founder of Riverford Organic Farmers, Guy Singh. Thanks very much for being with us. How worried should we be about this?
Well, I think we should be very worried. This July and August, huge swathes of Britain's wheat will be sprayed with glyphosate just days before harvest to very marginally ease harvest. And as a result, 50% of the population of the UK test positive for glyphosate in their urine, 80% in the US. I mean, this is a probable carcinogen. Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, have already paid out $7 billion in compensation, with another $10 billion earmarked just for current cases. So we think we can say it's a bit more than probable. I think we should be outraged that this is routinely being sprayed on our food, just as I say, days before harvest, with the full knowledge that we'll be eating glyphosate as a result. And there's a mounting evidence that the regulatory regime looking at the safety of glyphosate has got it wrong, because they've never looked at it with the adjuvants that are added that make it more absorbed by the crop and make it more absorbed by humans. It contributes to us having a leaky gut. And so I think we need to act urgently.
Is the issue, or the primary issue in your eyes, how close it might be sprayed to harvest?
Yes.
Presumably we do need some kind of weed killer either way.
We do. I think there needs to be a much broader debate around the use of glyphosate. It is an incredibly useful chemical, kills creeping weeds right down to the tips of their roots, and that's incredibly valuable to farmers. But I think there needs to be a sober debate about its benefits and its risks in a broader context. But for just this pre-harvest desiccation, the risks relative to the benefits are just way out of kilter. It's been banned in this particular use in Europe, and we need to follow suit.
Can I get a different view from you in terms of the impact on UK's food supply of the war in Iran, and the extent to which there is likely to be food shortages or more likely significant food price increases in light of shortages of everything from oil to fertiliser?
I think we have to expect increases in food prices and perhaps ultimately shortages. We import 40% of our food, but perhaps more alarming, the 60% that we do produce in the UK is highly dependent, for instance, in the case of dairy, on soya imported largely from South America. And in the case of the arable sector, huge quantities of nitrogen fertiliser, urea, and ammonium nitrate, much of which comes from the Middle East through the Straits of Hormuz. Our industry is incredibly vulnerable to what's happening in global markets, and the resulting instability is being pretty devastating for farmers.
Guy Singh, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Can I just ask that if anyone is interested in supporting our campaign that agrees to, if you go to Riverford's website, there's a petition that people can sign. The use of glyphosate is being reviewed this year, and this is our opportunity to bring some change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to have you on the programme. And now it's polling day. Polls have been open since 7 a.m. They shut at 10 p.m. I'm not sure if you managed to get out and vote already and being the early bird. If you're watching right now, maybe that you are a bit of an early bird.
Well, I guess a lot of people probably do early on the way to work.
Yeah, I think a lot of probably do. Yeah. Exactly. So we have been asking you to send us pictures of your dog going to the polling station. We're not allowed to talk about any politics today because of Purdah rules, Ofcom rules. So we thought you'd bring you some dogs instead. Frankie there in Cardiff. Let's zoom in, guys. You don't need to see us. The dogs are more attractive. Yeah, definitely. Let's have a look at the dogs. That was Frankie, as we said, in Cardiff. Hopefully we're going to go full screen on our next one. Well, there's Frankie. Here's Loretta. I think Loretta emailed in, not a picture of Loretta, but a picture of her dog. Not strictly speaking a polling station picture, but we thought we were going to show you anyway. She sent us a lovely email to go along with it. She's a dog sitter, I think, as well. So a very, very cute little dog there. Let's see if we can show you any more, squeeze in any more. I quite enjoyed someone sent me a picture of a cat saying that we were being catist by only,
Why isn't there a thing of cats at the polling station? You probably don't take your cat out.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why.
Yeah. I worked that answer out to that as I asked myself the question.
You started off and then... I love it.
Happy voting. Sky News Today up next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby.